Chapter 69. Rinpoche looked at her walking by the roadside with her bags. It seemed like she was going to move or go to the train station. He felt a little sympathy for her. After all, he used to be like her. He knew that it wasn't easy for a young person to survive in this city, let alone a disabled girl. Rinpoche had nothing to do and met this girl who gave him a good impression. He stopped the car not far away, opened the door, and walked to the back of the car. "Do you remember me?" Rinpoche walked in front of the girl and asked loudly. He didn't know how loud he should be for the girl to hear him. Last time, at a restaurant, a classmate of mine drank too much. He suddenly jumped out like a robber, and the girl was shocked. After seeing the person in front of her, she recalled carefully and showed a look of sudden realization. "Do you need help?" Rinpoche saw her expression and knew that she remembered him. The girl put the luggage she was carrying on the ground, took out a small notebook from her pocket, and wrote, "I remember. Thank you. Do you need help?" Rinpoche pointed at the luggage again. "Where are you going?" "I can do it myself. Thank you," the girl wrote. "Are you going home? To the station?" "I lost my job and changed my residence. I used to live in a dormitory." Rinpoche was slightly stunned. He didn't expect her to not live there anymore. Although it wasn't difficult for ordinary people to find a job, it was much more difficult for her. After all, not all bosses would accept a disabled person in their shop. But thinking about it, she should have some support groups for the disabled, such as WeChat groups, to help her find a job. "Where do you live? Let me send you there. Consider an apology for my classmate's rudeness. Anyway, I have nothing to do and am wandering around." Rinpoche was telling the truth. He really had nothing to do now. During the day, he had memorized Tang poems. Now, he was wandering around aimlessly. He was completely out to relax. The girl showed a distressed expression. It was indeed difficult for her to carry these things. Although the place she wanted to go wasn't far, it wasn't near either. It's hard to get a taxi in this area. Seeing her expression, Rinpoche picked up one of her luggage and said, "Don't worry, I don't have any bad intentions. I just want to apologize for what happened last time. Since I have nothing to do, I will help you if I can. Looking at the things you're carrying, it shouldn't be too far. It won't take me much effort." Seeing this, the girl finally nodded. After getting into the car, she flipped open a thank you message and showed it to him. Rinpoche waved his hand. "Which way?" The girl wrote down an address. Rinpoche took a look at it and entered it into the navigation system. It wasn't too far away. If he were to walk, it would be about 1 kilometer. However, it would indeed be somewhat troublesome to carry these things. "Have you found a new job?" Rinpoche asked. "We will find it soon," the girl wrote. From her words, Rinpoche could feel her drive. "I'm sorry, what's your name?" Rinpoche asked apologetically. The waiter did call his name before, but he had forgotten about it. "Anfi." "Very nice," Rinpoche casually praised. Anfi went back to the thank you card. She seemed to have written some common phrases on a piece of paper. Each piece of paper was a word, and when needed, she could just use it. The place that Anfi went to was a relatively old neighborhood. The rubbish bin in the courtyard seemed to have been left unclean for 2 days. After sending her downstairs, Anfi wrote on a piece of paper, "Thank you. When I find a new job, I'll treat you to a meal. Can you give me your phone number?" Rinpoche smiled and wrote his phone number on the paper. Then, he watched her walk into the corridor. He sat in the car and stared blankly for a while. He felt that he had changed a lot recently. If it was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have done such a thing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been immersed in his own world after attending school for so many years. He didn't even have a single friend. After coming out for a stroll, he was more or less relaxed. He found a place to have a meal and went back to memorize. When he opened his eyes and saw the familiar wooden beam, Rinpoche shook his head and sat up. He was still holding the book, 300 Poems of the Tang Dynasty. Even though he had slept, his brain was still a little numb. He felt that if he continued to memorize, he would become a fool. It was better to go out and play with Gun and Tion. Beside him was a bag filled with White Rabbit creamy candies, chocolate, and stun batons. After stuffing 2 stun batons into his waist, Rinpoche felt that he had regained the vigor of a Jedi. "From today onwards, I will continue to work hard to slap people with the soles of my shoes in the morning learn to read in the afternoon, and tell stories to His Majesty at night. After thinking about the things that he had to do every day, Rinpoche pushed open the door and picked up two pandas who were sleeping soundly. He swung his sword around like a storm before he finally put down the two fellows whose eyes were emitting stars. Once Tian Tian and Gun Gun landed on the ground, they stumbled and wanted to find Rinpoche to take revenge. In the end, one of them stumbled and knocked into the door frame, while the other stumbled and fell from the stone floor. They rolled and rolled on the ground. Rinpoche quickly raised his camera and took a photo of their silly and adorable behavior. When he was eating breakfast, Rinpoche suddenly remembered that the fans should be ready. He went out with Tung Hulu and Tai Dao. When he came back, the two of them each carried 10 fans. He threw them to Tong Jia and asked him to make the outer box the same way as the previous time. As for the color, there was no need for it. It was not as troublesome as the previous time. Anyway, there was no competition for this thing. He could sell it however he wanted as long as it was useful. If the things he sold were more exquisite than the ones he gave to the Empress, then he would be asking for trouble. "Brother, I brought back your sect's secret treasure." Just as Rinpoche was in a daze, he heard Caretaker Shi's voice. He turned around and saw Caretaker Shi, whose face had yet to recover, tossing an electric baton up and down in his hand. He had a complacent look on his face. Rinpoche didn't even need to think to know that this thing was definitely out of battery again. Otherwise, with Caretaker Shi's martial prowess, he would definitely not be able to retrieve it. Rinpoche reached out and took the electric baton. He was afraid that Rinpoche would mention the electric baton again, so he diverted his attention and asked, "How's the shop on Jingyang Road? I put up the sign yesterday, but I couldn't find you. Our shaved ice shop's reputation has spread out recently. We didn't do it outside like we did in the beginning. Many people came in after we put up the sign." As expected, Caretaker Shi was in high spirits when he mentioned this. Then, he grinned and stretched out his 5 fingers happily. "Just like you said, I tripled the price for foreigners. 15 copper coins a bowl. They had plenty of money anyway. Hey, look at their faces. I haven't felt so carefree in a long time." Chapter 70. In the afternoon, Rinpoche was learning calligraphy from Lin Shaola in Qingshin Palace Hall when he heard footsteps approaching. It sounded like there were quite a few people. He got up and walked to the entrance of the palace hall. The Empress, who was dressed in red, brought 2 palace maids and an imperial guard named Exinja. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Rinpoche quickly bowed. Upon hearing his voice, Lin Shaola immediately scuttled out from behind the table, bounced to the Empress's side, and greeted Your Majesty. Yes, the Empress's expression became much gentler when she saw Lin Shaola. Rinpoche was speechless. Lin Shaola actually hid her skills so well. No wonder she was able to become a librarian at such a young age. No wonder she gave the milk candy to the Empress as a gift. Although he didn't know what their relationship was, they seemed to be familiar with each other from their expressions. The Empress walked past him with her entourage. Rinpoche smelled a delicate fragrance and followed them obediently. Upon entering the palace hall, the Empress saw a pen and paper on the table with half-written words. "Are you practicing calligraphy? I wasn't familiar with Dayo's language previously." "I'm learning Dayo's language," Rinpoche explained from behind. The Empress nodded her head. As the storyteller of Qingshin Palace Hall, you naturally need to be literate. If those fellows in the imperial court could do the same, it would save her a lot of trouble. "How's your learning?" The Empress picked up the piece of paper with Rinpoche's scrawled handwriting and looked at it. Rinpoche's handwriting made her reminisce. When she was 3 years old, her handwriting should be like this too. It should be better than this. "In another 2 months, I should be able to read most of the words," Rinpoche replied. He was talking about reading, not writing. Even though he had to write every word a few times, it was to deepen his memory. He would forget most of it in no time. Writing still had to be practiced slowly in the future. The Empress nodded her head and didn't say anything else. She continued to lead the entourage in. Rinpoche carefully followed behind and went straight to the 2nd floor. After being here for so many days, this was the first time he went up to the 2nd floor. What surprised him the most was that there was actually an old lady with white hair and a beard in an official's robe guarding the second floor. He had never seen her come down during these few days. He also didn't hear any sound from upstairs and thought that there was no one here. "Greetings, Your Majesty. What books are you looking for?" The old woman stood up and smiled at the Empress. "Supervisor Lin, how's your health recently?" the Empress asked. "I'm fine. It's been a long time since I've had my old illness." "Ahem." Supervisor Lin coughed lightly after she finished speaking. Ren Baqin looked at him with disdain and said, "You're still pretending. Keep pretending. I've been here for so long, yet you haven't moved at all like a ghost. You're already coughing the moment the Empress comes." "But his surname is Lin? Could Lin Shaola be her daughter or granddaughter? One is a librarian, and the other is a librarian. Are they preparing for their daughter to inherit the family inheritance?" Ren Baqin glanced at Lin Shaola. On the other side, the Empress said warmly, "Supervisor Lin, you still have to take care of your health. Exinja, send 3 tails of red snake seed and 5 stalks of 100 core grass from the medicine storehouse in a while." "Yes, I'm here to look for the record of Dongxian. I suddenly feel like flipping through it," the Empress said. "I'm going to get it for Her Majesty." Librarian Lin bowed and said. Then she walked toward the inside with her hunched body. "I also want to see if there's anything else that I'm interested in," the Empress said again. Librarian Lin stopped in her tracks and made a pleased gesture. Ren Baqin looked at the Empress moving forward again. He didn't know whether he should follow her or not. Seeing that the others had already left, he followed behind. Speaking of which, he was also very curious about the difference between the books on the second floor and the first floor. According to common sense, the books on the second floor should be more precious than the ones on the first floor. The second floor was also filled with rooms. Every room was about the same size as the one below. However, one couldn't see what was inside. There was a layer of soft paper between the grids on the door, and nothing could be seen inside. "Your Majesty, it's here." When they reached the third last door, Librarian Lin stopped in her tracks and pushed open the door beside her. The Empress went in, followed by Librarian Lin. After that, Xian just stood at the door. Ren Baqin didn't even see what was inside. At the same time, he was even more curious. It was so well guarded. What exactly was inside? The record of Dongxian? A martial arts secret manual of this world? Ren Baqin felt that it was highly possible. This name didn't sound as common as 300 poems of the Tang dynasty. Furthermore, the Empress's martial arts was so high that it was reasonable for her to read martial arts secret manuals. Ren Baqin stood obediently at the door. Occasionally, he raised his head and looked around, wondering when the Empress would come out. Coincidentally, he saw Lin Shaola not far away from him. He immediately grinned and almost laughed out loud. He saw Lin Shaola standing there, swaying, and her eyes were already closed. An ordinary person would never think that she was actually asleep just by looking at the extent of her swaying. This kind of ability to sleep while standing definitely wasn't something an ordinary person could compare with. Ren Baqin had to admit that the temptation of the white rabbit creamy candy was indeed not small. It actually made Lin Shaola take time out of her busy sleep to teach Ren Baqin how to read. For a person who could sleep while standing here waiting for her superior, an ordinary person definitely wouldn't know how much she craved sleep. Perhaps lying in bed and sleeping till the end of time was the best ending for her. Bang! Ren Baqin looked up, and indeed, Lin Shaola's head had knocked into the wooden wall beside her. He lowered his head and made a laughing gesture. Not only him, but Qing Yuan and Hong Wan also covered their mouths and laughed softly. It seemed that the two of them already knew about Lin Shaola's situation. What happened? The Empress's voice came from inside the room. "Nothing. I accidentally knocked into the wall." Lin Shaola covered her head and quickly answered. She was angry for a long time before she rubbed her head and put her hand down. Not long after, she started to sway again. Ren Baqin thought for a while and felt that Lin Shaola might be sick. He remembered seeing on the news that there was a girl who had a strange illness and could only sleep 18 to 20 hours a day. She couldn't even work normally. Lin Shaola might be this kind of person. However, Her illness wasn't as serious as the other parties. Only those who had nothing to do would feel sleepy and unable to resist it. Usually, she would still be able to wake up if there was a sound, or if there was something to do, she could still force herself to stay awake. After waiting for a while, the door opened again. The Empress and Librarian Lin walked out one after another. The moment the two of them came out, Lin Shaola quickly widened her eyes as if she was glaring at someone. Soon after, she slowly calmed down and yawned. Ren Baqian took a glance and saw the Empress coming out with 2 books in her hands. She glanced at Ren Baqian indifferently and asked him to stand up straight. After sending the Empress out of the hall, Ren Baqian and Lin Shaola returned to the hall. Librarian Lin didn't come down from upstairs and only sent them to the staircase. "Are you really that sleepy?" Ren Baqian asked Lin Shaola curiously. A normal person could only sleep 8 hours a day. Even if they slept too much, they couldn't fall asleep even if they wanted to. He really couldn't understand how the other party could sleep so much. "I'm all right," Lin Shaola said listlessly as she lay on the table. Looking at her appearance, Ren Baqian felt that it was rather amusing. He casually threw a piece of Dove chocolate on the table. "Try it, it's on you." Just as the chocolate flew out, Lin Shaola caught it in her hands like an invisible hand. After removing the wrapper, Lin Shaola carefully took a bite. Then, like a hamster, she ate it in 2 or 3 bites and looked at Ren Baqian with sparkling eyes. Ren Baqian had a kind smile on his face. He thought that if he made chocolate-flavored feces, she would really eat it. A gentleman's revenge is never too late. Chapter 71. Ren Baqian did not learn for long before the Imperial Guard, named Exian, brought the medicine to the 2nd floor. After she came down, she pointed at Ren Baqian and said, "Follow me to see Her Majesty." He pushed the pen and paper to the side, got up, and followed Exian. Behind him, Lin Shaola was fuming as she looked at his back view. After snorting twice, she reluctantly put away the pen and paper. For the sake of Ren Baqian's white rabbit creamy candies every day, the familiar path was the same palace that he always went to. After entering, he found that a burly man in an official uniform was already standing inside. However, it was a little different from his own. The main body was black with a beast pattern on it, and the collar was yellow. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Ren Baqian stopped one step behind that person and bowed. That burly man turned his head to look at Ren Baqian and asked with a grin, "Your Majesty, is this the guy?" "This is the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall. This time, he will accompany you in receiving those people." The cold voice of the Empress came from above. "That's good. I think those people are already very annoyed. All of them don't have much ability and are a bunch of fart. If it weren't for the fact that they came to give gifts, they would have already cut off their heads and kicked them like a ball." The big man laughed loudly. "Ren Baqian, this is the Honglu Vice Minister. From tomorrow onwards, you can report to him. You don't have to go to Qingxin Palace Hall for the time being. As for the position, it would be in the Honglu Bureau. Gu Daxiong, are there any vacant positions?" The Empress asked from above. It had to be said that Gu Daxiong really lived up to his name. He looked like a bear, with a huge body and a face full of stubble, like a human bear. Ren Baqian lowered his head. He knew about the Honglu Bureau, which was responsible for external reception and various etiquettes. It was equivalent to a foreign affairs department. Since he was responsible for the reception of those people, it was perfectly justifiable for him to have his name in this department. Honglu Jr. official Gu Daxiong pondered for a moment before suggesting, "Why not we take up the position of Honglu Deputy? I remember that seat isn't empty, right?" The Empress asked. "I'll go back and give him a vacation. Anyway, he wants to quit long ago." Gu Daxiong grinned. Ren Baqian was speechless as he listened from the side. There was actually such an operation? What an eye-opener. He's called Qiji. I remember that he broke the legs of 4 people from the Yun Nation last year, and one of them even complained to me. So be it. The Empress's voice was heard, and both of them bowed in agreement. "How about this? If there's nothing else, you can leave." After the Empress finished speaking lazily, Qing Yuan, who was at the side, served a plate of grapes. The Empress plucked one and placed it in her mouth. This subject shall take his leave. After Gu Daxiong finished speaking, he retreated. Before he left, he grinned at Rinpoche, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth that glistened under the illumination of the lights in the hall. Come forward and continue your story. The Empress reclined on the couch. Her eyes were painted red, and her lips were as red as blood. When she plucked a grape and placed it in her mouth, her actions were extremely moving and made one's heart tremble. Rinpoche hurriedly lowered his head after taking a glance. He was so close to sticking his head into the ground. Oh, storyteller Run, raise your head and look straight at me. Why are you lowering your head? The Empress chuckled, looking languid and unrestrained. Rinpoche raised his head to take a glance and almost lowered his head again. Normally, the Empress was still fine. Even though she was beautiful, she was too cold and could only be observed from afar. However, today, she was lying on the couch, wearing a red muslin, looking languid and charming. Her posture, as she gently placed the grape in her mouth, made him feel like he was being teased. He coughed awkwardly and said, "Your Majesty's beauty is unparalleled in the world, like the bright sun in the sky. I feel ashamed of my inferiority and find it hard to look straight at you." Unparalleled in the world? The Empress asked. Yes, no one in the world can compare to you. Rinpoche lowered his head and replied. The celebrities on Earth were seen on TV every day. In terms of appearance, they were similar, but their identities were different. This was the monarch of a nation. That kind of excitement made Rinpoche's heart jump up and down. If he were to jump any further, his heart would jump out. You really know how to talk, the Empress said with a smile. Tell me about investiture of the gods. The story of your nation is indeed interesting. Yes, Rinpoche hurriedly responded. He opened his mouth for a long time and finally calmed himself down before he began to narrate the story. He only stopped when he reached the part where Baigan dug out his heart. According to usual practice, he should have stopped at this time. The lamp oil in the hall had been refilled several times. Tell me another part. I don't feel comfortable if I stop here, the Empress suddenly said. Rinpoche didn't expect the Empress to speak at this time. Today, the Empress was much more human than usual and less cold. He hurriedly nodded his head in response. Fortunately, he had completed Investiture of the Gods. If he were to read those web novels where chapters were missing, he would probably be in trouble. He narrated until Grand Tutor went to the East Sea to quell the chaos. Finally, he said, if you want to know the outcome, listen to the next chapter. After finishing the story in one breath, he felt refreshed and could finally get off work. Then, he wanted to give himself a slap. Did he really think of himself as a storyteller? What he was doing was just a matter of missing chapters. Sure enough, these were all passed down from generation to generation. Those web novels were just copying the wisdom of the ancient people. He looked up at the Empress and saw her squinting at him. She had no intention of speaking. Rinpoche continued to narrate until Ji Chong went to fetch Chong City. The Empress then stood up and said, "It's late. You can go now. For the next few days, just prepare for the Honglu Bureau. Also, make a few trips to the Imperial Kitchen when you are free. Teach them a few Chinese dishes for the banquet." Rinpoche bowed and asked, "Your Majesty, how are the arrangements for the banquet? What does your Majesty want?" "What do you mean?" The Empress was slightly puzzled. In China, there are delicious dishes of color and fragrance. There are also some dishes that taste good, but aren't in good condition, making it hard for people to eat. There are also some dishes that are only suitable for specific people. For example, especially spicy dishes, Rinpoche said softly. This was what he suddenly thought of after the Empress spoke. The Empress didn't like those people. She even wanted him to be the vanguard to criticize them. Whether they could eat the banquet would depend on the mood of the Empress in front of him. Rinpoche felt that he was getting better at playing the role of a lackey. This is interesting. The Empress laughed. Let's see who it is. But have you prepared the toffee? It's ready. Shall I send it to the palace tomorrow? Rinpoche quickly asked. No need. You go ahead with other matters. I will get someone to fetch it tomorrow morning. Rinpoche bowed and took his leave. After leaving the palace, Rinpoche recalled what happened just now and felt that he was a little too bold. He actually recklessly guessed the Empress's intentions and even pointed it out, but it didn't look too bad. Chapter 72. Early the next morning, Rinpoche was awakened by a knock on his door. When he opened the door, he saw a delicate face. It was actually Qing Yuan. She was standing outside the door with 2 guards nearby. His toes were still teasing Tian Tian and Gun Gun, who were rolling around on the side. "Greetings, Miss Qing Yuan." Rinpoche cupped his hands in greeting. He didn't know what to call it either. After all, the people in the imperial palace in ancient China were all eunuchs, so it was easier to address them. But those movies and television dramas didn't mention how to address the palace maids. He reckoned that Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were definitely of a higher grade than him. He thought for a moment and decided to just call her Mississippi. In any case, even if it was wrong, the other party wouldn't be able to find anything wrong with it. Qing Yuan stood up and smiled. When she saw Rinpoche, she wasn't unfamiliar with him. After all, she saw him every day. Furthermore, as the Empress's person, she was clear about some of the Empress's thoughts. She knew that Rinpoche might be put in an important position in the future. After all, he knew a lot of things and could speak well. He was a talent. Storyteller run. Where's the thing for Her Majesty? Qing Yuan laughed. Rinpoche hurriedly returned to the house, took out the bag, and handed it to Qing Yuan. At the same time, he stuffed a small bag that weighed about half a kilo in her hands. Here they are. Other than milk candies, there are other things. They were specially prepared for your majesty. As for this, it's for Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, Rinpoche said. He had just packed the bag when he went back, and there were still some bags left in the house after going back and forth a few times. With Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan's status, they probably didn't lack money. Maids and female officials weren't as eager to make money as eunuchs, especially with their status. I might as well put half a caddy of white rabbit creamy candies in it. This thing can be used as a stepping stone in the palace. Currently, it has been successful. Qing Yuan's eyes curved. No wonder His Majesty thinks so highly of him. He is indeed an exquisite person. Thank you for your praise. I don't deserve it. Rinpoche cupped his hands in obeisance. In that case, I shall not disturb you any further. Her Majesty is still waiting in the palace. Qing Yuan waved a small bag at Rinpoche before turning around and leaving. Not long after, he handed the bag for His Majesty to the Imperial Guard and held the small bag behind his back. Looking up at the sky, he estimated that it was about 7 o'clock. Rinpoche suddenly felt that he should get the watch back. At least he could look at the time. If this thing was sold, it should be able to fetch a high price, but the source of the goods was hard to say. Even though the Empress knew some things about him, he couldn't let others suspect him anymore. After all, she was the ruler of a nation and the 7th most powerful expert in the world. Her magnanimity was far beyond that of an ordinary person. Other people might not be as broad-minded as the Empress. If someone wanted to know his secret, he would be in trouble. It was better to get the mechanical blueprint of the clock and find someone to make it. More sophisticated processing equipment was not difficult to obtain. At most, he would wear one watch and give one to the Empress. He went to the kitchen and took a look around. When he saw that there was vegetable soup, he scooped a bowl of it and ate it together with some other grains. After that, he changed his clothes and brought Tung Hulu and Tai Dao to the Honglu Bureau. The Honglu Bureau was located in the Pearl Curtain District, not far from the Beihong District. Along the way, they did not encounter any fights. However, when they arrived at the Pearl Curtain District, they met a few people from the Public Order Bureau who were pushing a few badly battered people. It seemed like they were going to be whipped for fighting. One of the burly men from the Public Order Bureau was slightly stunned when he saw Rinpoche, following which, he sized him up carefully, called out to the others, and walked towards Rinpoche. Rinpoche smiled bitterly and nodded his head. Needless to say, he was definitely one of the 8 people who were beaten up by caretaker Shi. Did you give the thing to that bastard Shi Wan Shan? That burly man's face immediately became unfriendly. I was robbed, I'm innocent, Rinpoche said helplessly. Can you use the secret treasure of your sect? Lend it to me. Otherwise, let's draw a circle, that burly man shouted. Rinpoche felt Tung Hulu and Tai Dao behind him, take a step forward. He was satisfied. It was worth it to have these two underlings. In any case, it was enough for them to stand up for him when he was in trouble. He waved his hand behind him. Now that I'm the Honlu deputy, I can choose not to accept your challenge. Rinpoche smiled casually. According to his understanding, the Honlu deputy should have a higher position than this burly man. He could choose not to accept the challenge just because his position was higher. It was fine if he was bullied by the Empress, but Caretaker Sure was on good terms with him. Rinpoche couldn't bully everyone. There's such a thing? That bastard Sure, Wan Shan, didn't mention it before. Aren't you from the Beast Park? That burly man scratched his head in confusion. Rinpoche cupped his hands and said, I'm about to report to the Honlu deputy. You are the first outsider to take up an official position in Dayo. Forget it, your position is higher than mine. That burly man looked at Rinpoche and grinned. He didn't seem to mind at all, waved his hand at him, and left. Rinpoche looked at his back and shook his head slightly. This person wasn't bad. He was similar to the Aboriginal men that Rinpoche had met before, but a little vulgar. However, from his attitude, Rinpoche could tell that if he didn't have an official position in Dayo, it would be difficult for him to do anything. The Aboriginals weren't polite to outsiders. He shouldn't even think about being a wealthy man, unless he went to another country, but it wouldn't necessarily be a good outcome. Therefore, it was better to cozy up to the Empress in the future. Based on his experience in the Beast Park and the Palace, the Dayo people weren't averse to becoming one of their own after holding a position or official position. Regardless of whether it was Caretaker Sure or a few other caretakers, or even the odd job workers and their family members, they were all the same. It was the same for some of the people he met in the palace. Let's go. Rinpoche gestured for the two people behind him to head to the Honlu deputy. Outside the Honlu deputy was a huge courtyard with a few tall buildings. From the main gate, one could see that there was a passageway leading to the back of the building. The two burly men at the entrance were dressed differently from the palace guards and the people from the Public Order Bureau that Rinpoche had seen just now. It was a sleeveless shirt, revealing two thick, muscular arms. In addition, the two of them had ferocious faces and murderous eyes, which made it impossible for strangers to approach them. If one didn't know better, they would have thought that they were in prison. In a normal diplomatic department, wouldn't they find a few good-natured people who were easy to deal with? However, Dayo had specially placed two fiendish-looking men to guard the entrance. They couldn't wait to keep everyone out. They were simply a weirdo in the diplomatic department. This is the Honlu deputy. What's the matter? One of them stopped Rinpoche and said fiercely, Look for Gu Shaoqing. Tell him that Rinpoche is here to report, Rinpoche said. Report. That person sized up Rinpoche suspiciously. Wait a minute. The other person turned and entered the courtyard. Rinpoche felt that he should have worn his official robes. Originally, he thought that there was no need to wear the official robes of the palace since he was here to report to the Honlu deputy. He didn't expect that there would be trouble everywhere. Previously, he didn't feel it when he was walking in the city. Today, he really felt it. Not long after, that person came out and said, Go in, Sir Gu is waiting for you. Chapter 73. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he was greeted by a burly man with bell-like eyes and short stubble. He grabbed Rinpoche's shoulder and asked, Are you Rinpoche? Rinpoche nodded. I will depend on you in the future. The burly man grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and shook him back and forth. For some reason, Rinpoche felt that these words were like a dying wish. Then, the burly man laughed out loud. I finally don't have to deal with those bastards. I want to pinch them to death every time. Looking at his ecstatic expression, it was as if he had been sentenced to at least 3 years and was suddenly released. Rinpoche looked at him with bright eyes. Needless to say, this was the former Honlu deputy, the one who broke the legs of 4 people and was reported. Rinpoche was curious. Was it so painful to deal with foreigners in the Honlu Bureau? That burly man laughed wildly for a long time before patting Rinpoche's shoulder and saying, Boss Gu is waiting for you at the back. Turn right from here to the biggest house. Then, he threw his head back and laughed out loud. Rinpoche followed the direction he pointed and passed through the first row of buildings. There was a row of slightly shorter buildings at the back, and the door of the largest building on the right was open. Sir Gu, Rinpoche got the two of them to stay where they were and shouted as he walked to the door. Gu Daxiong was sitting behind a desk. The desk was empty except for two big feet. It was different from an ordinary office. There was nothing on the desk. Come in. Gu Daxiong raised his head and waved at Rinpoche. Did you see Qi Ji? You should have met him before. Rinpoche felt that they were talking about the burly man from just now. Yes, he ran away. From now on, you will be in charge until the group of people leave after His Majesty's birthday celebration. All I ask is that they don't bother me, and you can do whatever you want. If you don't like him, just beat him up. Just don't kill him. Gu Daxiong casually threw a token on the table. Rinpoche was speechless as he took the token. Go find Gu Shou and get a set of official robes to alter first. If you see that there's nothing to do in the courtyard, take away the servants and use them. Just one thing, don't let them bother me. Gu Daxiong grinned and reiterated. Rinpoche could only nod. It seemed like he was really throwing everything to him this time. The officials of Dayo were indeed different from the flirtatious and cheap people of other places. Sir Gu, when exactly is Her Majesty's birthday celebration? How much longer until then? Rinpoche cupped his hands and asked. There are still 22 days left. He reckoned that someone would come the next 2 days. Some of them will stay in the residences of the envoys from other countries, while others will be arranged by them. The rest will be up to you. Where are they arranged? Rinpoche asked again. There had to be a place for them to be arranged. Find Gu Shou. He will tell you where to go, Gu Daxiong said. If anything happens to them, or if there's any trouble, if they deserve to be beaten, then beat them up. They were the ones who insisted on coming over. No one begged them to come over. Gu Daxiong interrupted Rinpoche. When Rinpoche saw this, he felt that it was better to wait and see. Sir Gu, one last question. What if the opponent is an expert? With my skills, I can't beat anyone, Rinpoche finally asked. If he was beaten up by someone else, he would definitely be buried by the Empress. Gu Daxiong looked at Rinpoche suspiciously. Even though Rinpoche's physique was a little thin and weak, and he didn't look like he could fight, but Her Majesty actually arranged for a weakling to come over. In any case, Rinpoche was the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, and that old lady was very powerful. Wait. After finishing his sentence, Gu Daxiong stood up and walked towards the door. When he passed by Rinpoche, he swung his arm and almost flipped Rinpoche over. Why don't you have any strength at all? Gu Daxiong turned his head and looked at Rinpoche doubtfully. Rinpoche was pushed back a few steps. Looking at Gu Daxiong's innocent and doubtful face, he could only sigh. Gu Daxiong walked to the door and shouted, Xiong Pai, get your ass over here. This shout was really earth-shattering, and the Honglu Bureau was immediately thrown into chaos. Boss, he's here, he's here. A loud voice came from afar. When the person appeared at the door, Rinpoche immediately felt as if a wall had suddenly appeared in front of the door. Even half of the light outside the door was blocked, and the room became dark in an instant. The person who appeared at the door was a burly man who was more than 2 meters tall. He was bald, bare-chested, and wore a pair of cloth pants. His entire body was bulging with muscles, and there were many scratches on his body that looked like those left by wild beasts. Gu Daxiong's physique was like that of a bear, but the person outside was taller and stronger than him. Xiong Pai were the largest of their kind, and the person at the door really lived up to his name. Compared to him, Caretaker Sure was not much stronger than a chicken. Xiong Pai, this is the newly appointed deputy. You will follow him for the next few days and beat up whoever he tells you to beat up. Oh, greetings, deputy. Su Dali cupped his hands towards Rinpoche. His voice was a little muffled, and he seemed a little silly. Rinpoche walked to Gu Daxiong's side and compared the difference in their physiques. Gu Daxiong's arms were almost as thick as his waist. Just by standing there, he was like King Kong, giving people a huge sense of oppression, especially when looking at the scars on his body from such a close distance. Rinpoche felt that his entire body was emitting a fierce aura. If a hatchet man was to be graded based on his appearance, Rinpoche felt that he could be given a score of 9. He gave off one mark because he was afraid that Xiong Pai would become arrogant. As long as his strength is not at the heaven rank, no one can defeat him. Gu Daxiong hammered his chest twice, producing a thumping sound. Xiong Pai revealed a simple and honest smile, and there were still shreds of meat in the gaps between his teeth. Was heaven rank the division of strength in this world? Rinpoche did not know whether it was heaven rank, man rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, or upwards ho. In any case, heaven rank should be very powerful, and he did not know what rank the Empress was at. Rinpoche cupped his hands and thanked. Thank you, Sir Gu. It's all right. Looking at your small physique, he will follow you for the next few days. Gu Daxiong waved his hands. Then where should I look for Gu Shou? The house at the very end. Gu Daxiong pointed to the left side of the main door. Thank you. Then I will take my leave. Rinpoche walked out of the door, and Xiong Pai followed him. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai was much taller than him, and he had to raise his head to look at Xiong Pai's face. When Xiong Pai walked, Rinpoche could feel the tremors under his feet. I will have to take care of you for the next few days. Everyone has to complete the tasks given by the higher-ups, Rinpoche said to Xiong Pai. Deputy, I will beat up whoever you tell me to. Xiong Pai grinned and gave a simple and honest smile. Yes, it sounded crude, but the logic was not crude. That was exactly what he meant. Rinpoche nodded his head in satisfaction and went to the room at the very end to look for Gu Shou. After entering, he realized that Gu Daxiong was one size smaller. Even his actions were exactly the same. He was sitting on a chair, and both his legs were directly placed on the table. Chapter 74. Gu Shou threw an official robe to Rinpoche. If it was worn by someone else, it might be just right or slightly loose, but if it was worn by Rinpoche, it would be unsightly. He held it in his hands and prepared to find a tailor shop to change it. Originally, Tung Hulu and Tai Dao were his two bodyguards. Now, with Xiong Pai, they were nothing. Standing in front of Xiong Pai, one would have to look up to him. Although Tung Hulu and Tai Dao were not small, they were only about 1.75 meters tall, similar to Rinpoche. It was just that their bodies were much more muscular and weighed at least 100 kilograms. But compared to Xiong Pai, they were as thin and weak as chicks. Rinpoche pressed on Xiong Pai's arm. It was as if it was made of steel. Sir Run, this is, the two asked. This is Xiong Pai. He will be following me for the next few days. Both of you can go back first, Rinpoche said. Deal with those animal hides as soon as possible. I still need them. The two nodded their heads. They were originally from the Beast Park. They followed Rinpoche every day because it was easy for something to happen when Rinpoche went out alone. With Xiong Pai by his side, the two of them had nothing to worry about. What do you usually do in the division? Rinpoche asked Xiong Pai after the two of them left. Drink, sleep, and practice martial arts. Xiong Pai grinned. Practice martial arts? What do you practice? Rinpoche asked with interest. Deputy, you will know when you come. Xiong Pai led Rinpoche around a row of houses. There was a field at the back. At this moment, there were 5 or 6 people there. A few of them were practicing martial arts. Their movements were very fast and powerful. There was also someone lifting a stone block. It was the kind that weighed 100 kilograms. He raised it horizontally and put it down again and again. When Rinpoche arrived, he saw that the other party was sweating profusely. He had done more than 30 stone blocks in a row and was still the same. Rinpoche did not know how many stone blocks he had done. What do you usually do? Rinpoche asked. He was curious about Xiong Pai's strength. After all, there were not many people with such a physique in Dayo. Although physique did not represent strength, Gu Daxiong had specially asked Xiong Pai to follow him. Presumably, Xiong Pai's strength was top-notch. My lord, please watch from the side, lest you get hurt. Xiong Pai grinned and walked to the side. There was a big stone that was 1 meter square. He directly hugged it with both hands and shouted loudly. He lifted the huge stone up to his eyebrows and slowly put it down. Then he raised it again and put it down again. Rinpoche, who was standing at the side, opened his mouth and was almost stunned by him. One had to know that a 1 meter square stone weighed 2 to 3 tons, and he lifted it just like that. Moreover, he raised and lowered it several times. Finally, with a loud shout, he directly threw the stone over his head, throwing it 2 to 3 meters high. Damn, Rinpoche couldn't help but speak. If it landed like that, an ordinary person would have been smashed into a meat patty. It would be easier for Rinpoche to accept if he were to toss 200 to 150 kilograms into the air. But this was 2 to 3 tons, almost the weight of a car. Xiongpai, on the other hand, caught it calmly and steadily. He only pressed his legs down a little to cushion the impact. Then, he threw the stone up again and caught it again. When Xiongpai threw the stone for fun, the other player couldn't play anymore. He got a stone that weighed 1 or 200 kilograms, but Xiongpai got a stone that was 20 times the size. How would he play? It was embarrassing. All right, stop, Rinpoche hurriedly shouted. Looking at Xiongpai's training movements made him a little dizzy. His heart was trembling, and he always felt that if he missed, a freshly made pizza would appear in front of him. If Xiongpai were to dye his entire body green, he could become the Hulk. Wouldn't it attract suspicion? Upon hearing Rinpoche shout, Xiongpai immediately turned around and walked away. He didn't even catch the stone and smashed it on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble. Let's go and change your official uniform first. Rinpoche looked at Xiongpai in front of him. Even after throwing a 2 to 3 ton stone a few times, he didn't even break a sweat. After bringing Xiongpai out, Rinpoche felt that he didn't have to worry about being hit by people when he walked. With such a guy behind him, no one would be blind enough to bump into him. Xiongpai's physique was rather terrifying for the people of Dayo. He was the kind that would attract sidelong glances wherever he went. Julian District basically had more yamen offices and very few residences and shops. Rinpoche directly brought Xiongpai to Gujiazhai District. There were more residences there, and it should be easier to find a shop for changing clothes. Just as he entered the main street of Gujiazhai, he saw a shaved ice shop at the side. There were many people sitting inside, and they were all there to avoid the summer heat and eat shaved ice. This was still in the morning. If it was in the afternoon, there would be more people. Qing Shan. Rinpoche went in and shouted. Sai Sir Rin. Sir Qing Shan raised his head and shouted. The dust on the roof beam kept falling. Lower your voice. Don't be so loud. Rinpoche rubbed his ears and said, Give me 2 bowls of shaved ice, any fruit. Then, he found an empty table and sat down. Sit here. Rinpoche patted the stool beside him. Xiongpai shook his head and said, I'd better not sit. Sit, I said so. Rinpoche insisted. There was no reason for him to stand while he was sitting. He still needed his protection from now on. Seeing that Rinpoche insisted, Xiongpai slowly sat down. Crack. The long stool immediately broke. Xiongpai got into a horse stance, stood up, and scratched his head. I'd better stand. Rinpoche was speechless. It seemed like Xiongpai had broken 1 or 2 stools from sitting and was already experienced. Looking at Xiongpai's physique, Rinpoche called out to Sir Qing Shan, Give me another bowl of shaved ice. When the 3 bowls of shaved ice were served, Rinpoche picked the color that suited him the best and pushed the other 2 bowls to Xiongpai. This is for you. Don't eat too quickly. Along the way, he felt that Xiongpai was a little silly and was somewhat similar to Tong Jia. Rinpoche was only halfway through his meal when he looked up and saw that Xiongpai had already finished 2 bowls. He was still licking his lips and had a satisfied look on his face. This is cooling. Xiongpai laughed foolishly. Rinpoche quickly finished his bowl and looked up to call out to Sir Qing Shan. Qing Shan, where do you find clothes changing? Walk 300 steps forward and there will be one in the alley next to it. Let's go. Rinpoche called out and brought Xiongpai to the location that Sir Qing Shan pointed out. Indeed, they saw an alley that turned right. It was only 2 meters wide, and there were wooden houses at the side. After walking for a while, they didn't see a single signboard. Brother, can I ask where the clothes-changing shop is? Rinpoche called out to a burly man who had just come out of the house to pour some water. You have walked past it. That's the one. That man took a glance at Rinpoche and then looked at Xiongpai, who was behind him. He stretched out his hand and pointed. Rinpoche turned around and saw that the man was pointing at the third door at the entrance of the alley. "Thanks, brother." Rinpoche laughed, turned around, and entered the house with Xiongpai. Chapter 75. Rinpoche stayed in the Honglu Bureau for 2 days and more or less understood the people and rules there. During this period, he found out that Xiongpai lived in a courtyard not far from the Honglu Bureau. Those outsiders were usually arranged to stay there. Xiongpai loitered around the courtyard and could definitely play a role in stabilizing the situation. During this period, Rinpoche made a trip back to Earth. When he came back, he took 300 song poems and sat in the Honglu Bureau. When he had nothing to do, he would recite song poems. At least, he had nothing to do and was still in a state of idleness. Xiongpai followed Rinpoche wherever he went. When Rinpoche was reciting song poems, Xiongpai would immediately sit on the ground and start snoring. Rinpoche wished he could stuff socks into Xiongpai's mouth. Deputy, someone's here." On the afternoon of his first day back from Earth, Rinpoche was pondering how to stuff Xiongpai's mouth when a loud voice came from outside. "Who's that?" Rinpoche couldn't react for a moment. He said he's called Mr. Emptiness. The person who came in was one of the guards at the entrance. His name was Qi Sheng. He came from the same village as the original deputy Qi Ji. There was another guard called Qi Heng who was also at the entrance. "Mr. Emptiness?" Rinpoche immediately reacted. These were the people who came to celebrate the Empress's birthday. "Xiongpai, get up and follow me to take a look." Rinpoche kicked Xiongpai's waist twice. It felt like he was kicking a rock. He brought the sleepy Xiongpai to the entrance and saw 4 pretty young ladies in colorful clothes carrying a palanquin. When the 4 ladies saw him, they grabbed a handful of flower petals from their waist pockets and scattered them into the sky. "Who's coming?" Rinpoche stood at the entrance and looked at this scene. He had a bad premonition. "Mr. Emptiness has arrived." The young lady in front shouted delicately and scattered another handful of flower petals. "Please follow me in to register. Leave the palanquin outside." Rinpoche looked at her awkwardly. What was she trying to do? Cough, cough. A series of coughing sounds came from within the palanquin. Soon after, the curtain was lifted, and a young man wearing a silver silk robe walked out. His face was covered with a layer of powder, and his lips were green. His appearance was passable, but this sickly posture that seemed like it would be blown away by a gust of wind was no longer just a sign of emptiness. It was clearly a sign of kidney deficiency. Young master kidney deficiency, right? "Follow me." With his hands behind his back, Rinpoche turned around and walked in expressionlessly. "Cough, cough. It's young master emptiness, young master emptiness." Young master emptiness quickly explained. "I'm just joking, Mr. Emptiness." Rinpoche didn't even turn his head. Cough, cough, cough. "You damaged a table, a piece of Honglu Bureau's special paper, and a compensation of 100 taels of silver." Mr. Emptiness took out a few golden leaves from his waist and lightly threw them to Xiongpai. Or rather, they should be called golden leaves. They were like books with 10 pages and could be taken apart for use. "I don't have a place to stay. I'm afraid I will have to trouble you to arrange it for me," Mr. Emptiness said. Rinpoche rummaged through the ground. That piece of paper was only left with fragments. "Before that, I have to fill it in again." Rinpoche stood up and found another piece of paper from the cabinet beside him. This time, Mr. Emptiness could only place the paper on the wall and write. He coughed a few times while writing. Rinpoche felt that there seemed to be some problems with his lungs. He did not know if it was because of his training or because of this. "I have finished writing." Mr. Emptiness passed the paper to Rinpoche. Rinpoche glanced at it. This Mr. Emptiness's surname was Zhao. He could recognize 2 words from his name, but there was one that he did not recognize. He was from Great Xia's XX Zhao family. He also did not recognize the name of the place. He placed the paper on a shelf and pressed a piece of wood on it. "I will bring you to the place where you will stay." Rinpoche walked in front with Xiongpai. Mr. Emptiness left the Honglu Bureau and got on a sedan chair and followed behind. After walking for a short distance, they arrived at a courtyard. They were all individual courtyards, and each courtyard had 4 rooms. One of them was the kitchen, one was the master bedroom, and the other 2 were for the attendants. The courtyard was divided into 3 rows. The first row faced the main street, and Rinpoche arranged for Mr. Emptiness to stay there. He was the first to arrive, so naturally, the place was the best. Mr. Emptiness was satisfied with this position. After getting off the sedan chair, he cupped his hands and thanked Rinpoche. In a while, someone will send you a sign to prove that you're staying in this courtyard, Rinpoche said to him. You can make your own arrangements. There are bedding and whatnot inside. Cough, cough. Thank you very much, Deputy Rin. Mr. Emptiness coughed violently after finishing his sentence. The handkerchief covering his mouth was dyed red. I shall not disturb you anymore. Rinpoche saw that he was coughing up blood and hurriedly left. Could it be that he was suffering from tuberculosis? It was better to stay away from him. After leaving the courtyard, Rinpoche turned back to take a look. It was the Empress's birthday celebration. Why did a sickly person like him come all the way here? But these people were really ruthless. If he did not have Xiong Pai by his side to protect him, he would have been in trouble. What did he mean by slowing down when he was in front of him? Who was he trying to fool? To be able to throw a piece of soft paper like a dart. What kind of technique did he have? This was only the first person, and he did not know what kind of people would come after him. He was afraid that this task would be more troublesome than what he had originally thought. If there were many of these people, it would be difficult to deal with them without using force to suppress them. Chapter 76. Rinpoche strolled back with Xiong Pai. He deeply felt that this job might not be as easy as he had previously thought. Just the fact that Mr. Emptiness's palanquin was carried by the 4 young ladies who were able to carry the palanquin all the way to Lawn City showed that they were definitely not ordinary people. He fiddled with the golden page in his hand. It really looked like a pocket-sized golden book. Taking a closer look, he realized that there were words carved on each page. It was a pity that he couldn't understand what was written. Just as he returned to the entrance of the Honglu Bureau, he saw a young man wearing a dirty robe and carrying a book on his back. He was talking to Qi Heng and Qi Sheng. It was the kind that Ning Kai-chun carried in a Chinese ghost story. It was used to store the 4 books and 5 classics. There was a piece protruding from the top to block the sun during the day and also to block the rain during the rain. No one knew what they were talking about, but Qi Sheng suddenly took a step forward, scaring the young man so much that he almost fell to the ground. What's going on? Rinpoche asked as he approached. Deputy! Both of them turned around and greeted him with cupped hands. This is... He said he came to celebrate His Majesty's birthday. Qi Heng said. Rinpoche sized him up. That young man was about 16 or 17 years old and had a tender face. Rinpoche didn't know what kind of family would actually allow him to cross the border and come to Dayo. His body was a little dirty. He didn't know how long it had been since he last bathed. His robe was covered in dust. Are you the deputy here? The young man asked curiously. Rinpoche nodded. I am. What? You don't look like one. The young man nodded honestly. It doesn't look like it. You will be beaten for being so honest. Rinpoche looked at him from the corner of his eyes. I'm sorry. I meant that you don't look like someone from Dayo, the young man quickly said. You came by yourself? Yes, the young man said. Come in with me and register yourself. Rinpoche waved his hand and walked into the courtyard with his hands behind his back. How should I address you? Rinpoche asked casually. Surname Ning, given name Kai-chun. Ning Kai-chun. Rinpoche suddenly turned his head to look at Ning Kai-chun. His neck almost turned 180 degrees, scaring Ning Kai-chun, who was behind him. Sir, it's Ning Kai-chun. What's wrong? Is Xiaoqian doing well? Rinpoche put on a fake smile and didn't know what to think. I've just met young Master Kidney Deficiency, and now there's Ning Kai-chun. This world is really a coincidence, and it's a small one. Who is little Qian? Ning Kai-chun was a loss. Perhaps you will meet them in the future, Rinpoche said. When he returned to the room, it was still a mess. The broken table lay on the floor, and there were many broken pieces scattered around. Fill in this form. Name, place of origin, background, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Ren Bachien passed the paper to him and pointed to the windowsill. It didn't take long for Ren Bachien to receive the paper from Ning Kaichen. He scanned through the paper and saw that it was from Great Xia. After putting the paper away, she brought him to his residence. Along the way, Ren Bachien inquired about the happenings along the way. He was very curious about everything in the outside world. At the mention of this, Ning Kaichen couldn't stop talking. He was in high spirits as he recounted his experiences. Along the way, he described it as though Tang Sung went on a pilgrimage for 81 hardships. Sir, there's something you don't know. One day, I was camping in the deep mountains. A huge bird covered the sky and covered the sun. When it flapped its wings, it almost blew me off the mountain. Later on, I hugged an old tree that was hundreds of years old and saved my life. At that time, my heart almost jumped out of my chest. I didn't expect such an exaggerated thing to exist in this world. It was really an eye-opener. When I return, I will definitely draw this thing and let the world know about it. Another time, I was camping in an ancient temple. In the middle of the night, a young lady suddenly came to seek shelter. She said that she missed the right time to travel in the mountains. I shared half of my rations with her. Later on, she said that she wanted me to rest at her house for a day to thank her. At that time, I thought that I was indeed a little tired from traveling for a few days. Since her house wasn't far away, I thought of going to her house to rest for a day. Later on, when I woke up, there wasn't any luxurious house. Instead, there was an ancient tomb around it. Another time, I met a group of robbers. When they saw that I had nothing on me, they kidnapped me and brought me to the mountain. The king of the mountain was actually a woman. She was 16 years old, unmarried, and as beautiful as a flower. When they saw that I was a scholar and that I was fair, they wanted to marry me. Later on, I pretended to agree and ran away while they were preparing for the wedding banquet. Now that I think about it, it's really sad. Ren Bachien was dumbfounded by Ning Kaichen's bluff. He had to admit that Ning Kaichen was more suitable for storytelling than him. Even though Ning Kaichen looked immature and weak, he was a veteran in bragging. Ren Bachien felt that if he didn't have such outstanding bragging skills, he might not have been able to arrive at Lan City unscathed. It was a short journey from the Honglu Bureau to his residence. At the very least, Ren Bachien felt that he couldn't bear not to take care of him after listening to his words and the hardships he went through along the way. He didn't even want the beautiful female king of the 28-mountain village just to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday. This kind intention was really touching. Ren Bachien brought him to his residence. It was a courtyard that was connected to Mr. Emptiness's. "You can stay here for the time being," Ren Bachien said. "Thank you very much, deputy." "I can't thank you enough," Ning Kaichen said. He felt a little regretful that he couldn't continue to brag. "I'm just doing my job. If there's anything, you can look for me at the Honglu Bureau. If I'm not around, look for someone else," Ren Bachien instructed. After all, he didn't look like he was very good at fighting. Of course, this was hard to say. After all, he had traveled a long way to get here. Bragging skills alone might not always be useful. This Ning Kaichen might be an expert in disguising himself as a pig to eat a tiger. Ren Bachien waved his hand at Ning Kaichen and brought Xiong Pai back. When he passed by the courtyard where Mr. Emptiness lived, he took a glance inside. The sedan chair was still there, but he didn't see the 4 women who were carrying it. They should be in the house. After returning to the Honglu Bureau, he didn't encounter anything else. He sat there and recited the song Si until the sky turned dark. When he estimated that it was about time, he sent Xiong Pai back and strolled to the Chen medicine shop alone. Now that he was wearing his official uniform, he wouldn't encounter any trouble walking on the streets. Previously, he mentioned that as long as he wore this uniform, it would represent that he was an official of Dayo. Even if he didn't look like an aboriginal, the aboriginals would still treat him as one. Being able to stroll around by himself without 2 burly bodyguards made Ren Bachien feel rather comfortable. There weren't many people in the Chen medicine shop. When Chen Zixing saw Ren Bachien, he was a little surprised and asked, "Mr. Ren, are you an official in Dayo?" "Just a nominal position in the Honglu Bureau." Ren Bachien smiled. "You are wearing a secondary class, rank 6 official uniform. It shouldn't be as simple as a nominal position. Chun Zixing laughed. Rinpoche knew that the Honlu Bureau's deputy was a primary class, rank 6 official. However, seeing that Chun Zixing could tell a glance, Rinpoche asked him about the differences between official uniforms. Every rank of official had a different uniform. I've learned a lot. Rinpoche cupped his hands in obeisance. He only knew a little about these things that everyone in Dayo, especially in Lon City, knew about. Of course, there were also those who scolded the merchants of various countries, saying that salt and cloth were expensive and that they didn't even pay much for furs. Rinpoche suddenly felt that the world had become a lot more lively after listening to these family gossip. Life was supposed to be like this, full of family trifles, haggling over every ounce. It was not like the palace that he entered and exited every day, which was quiet, cold, and solemn. Not long after, the dishes were served. It was a plate of steamed mutton and a plate of sauce. It was unknown what was used to make the sauce, but it was a little spicy. However, it covered up a lot of the mutton's odor. It tasted pretty good. The other plate was a stewed fish. It was very simple, with only salt and something similar to ginger. However, the fish was tender and tasty. The wine was relatively inferior. It tasted bland and was very turbid. Rinpoche sat there and listened to the bustle around him. He unhurriedly ate half of the dishes and drank all the wine. He actually felt a little tipsy. "Shopkeeper, bill please," Rinpoche shouted. "Sir, 80 copper coins." That burly man appeared in front of Rinpoche again. Rinpoche took out a piece of silver and threw it on the table. "Keep the change." "Thank you, sir." The burly man grinned. His facial expression became even more ferocious, but Rinpoche felt that he was more pleasing to the eye. He got up and left the restaurant. Rinpoche strolled toward the direction of the palace as if he was taking a stroll. Before he reached the palace, he heard a loud noise in front of him, followed by loud laughter. What happened again? Rinpoche was curious and quickened his pace. When he was about to reach the plaza, he finally saw the scene in front of him clearly. The surroundings were dark, but the plaza in front of the palace was brightly lit. He saw more than 20 soldiers standing in a circle with torches in their hands. In the middle were 2 men and a woman. Opposite the 3 of them was a burly man holding a long saber. He wore leather armor on his chest and left shoulder. The laughter came from the burly man holding the long saber. As for the 2 men and the woman opposite him, the 2 men were using long swords while the woman was using a pair of short sabers. The 3 of them obviously couldn't care less about the surrounding soldiers. All their attention was focused on the burly man in front of them. "Hand over Long Wanli's corpse. You have already killed him. Why won't you let us take his corpse away? We just want to bring his corpse back." The woman shouted angrily. Come. Let me test your skills. If you can withstand 10 moves from me, I will let you leave. If you can kill me, I will let you take my corpse away. I guarantee that no one will seek revenge on you. If you can't withstand 10 moves from me, you will also be buried here." The burly man held the saber and laughed wildly. "Do you mean what you say? Who are you?" One of the men looked around at the surrounding soldiers and shouted. "I'm a left guard commander of the palace, Shan Wanshui." "Remember this name well," the burly man shouted. "As for the 3 of you, report your names to me after you survive." The 3 of them looked at each other. It was already difficult enough to deal with more than 20 soldiers around them, not to mention the middle guard commander in front of them. There was only one path in front of the 3 of them: kill this middle guard commander or withstand 10 moves from him. Otherwise, they would definitely die tonight. Rinpoche saw everything clearly from afar and sighed in his heart. Why did they have to come all the way here to deliver their heads? Wasn't it good to be alive? Why did they have to die? Let's see if you, the middle guard commander, are really that powerful. One of the men shouted and pounced toward Shan Wanshui. There was a flash of light in the air like a flower blooming. Showy, but impractical. Shan Wanshui laughed and didn't make any other moves. He held the end of his saber and swung it over. There was only a brilliant saber gleam in the air. Sword shadows and flowers were all cut down. That man was shocked and quickly placed his sword in front of his chest. Clang! The sword broke with a sound. Zi Tao. The other man and woman shouted angrily and pounced toward Shan Wanshui. There was a rain of blood in the air. That man was split into two halves. As the two halves of the corpse fell to the ground, blood and internal organs spilled all over. Rinpoche felt disgusted looking at it from afar. It was really too disgusting. However, the people who came this time were really too weak. With this standard, they still dared to snatch Long Wanli's corpse in front of Dayo's palace. This confirmed Rinpoche's opinion that they really came all the way here to deliver their heads. Fortunately, there were 3 of them. If there were 2 more, Shan Wanshui could have killed 5 people tonight. As for Shan Wanshui, he swept his saber horizontally at the 2 people who pounced on him. His movements were incomparably swift. The saber gleam reflected the flames like lightning and disappeared in a flash. The 2 people knew that they couldn't withstand it and dodged. Third move, Shan Wanshui shouted. He held his saber and chopped at the man who was closest to him, smashing a stone slab on the ground into pieces. Fourth move, the hilt of his saber moved toward the woman who was thrusting her twin short sabers. The moment the twin sabers came in contact with the lady, she felt a jolt in her arms. There was a sharp pain in the area between her thumb and forefinger, and the twin sabers were bounced off. Chapter 78. Hong Xian. The remaining man howled in grief. "I'll fight you to the death," he roared. His entire body transformed into a shooting star as he charged towards Shan Wanshui with his sword. His posture was similar to Long Wanli's, but his aura was far inferior. A ray of light flashed past. The burly man stood up with his sword in hand. Only 6 moves. He then burst out laughing. The burly man's attacks weren't as flashy as the others. Every move was powerful and fast as lightning, but the others couldn't even parry. The commander is mighty. Cheers could be heard from the sidelines. The deaths of the 3 men did not cause any ripples in the hearts of the others. They were already used to it. Rinpoche looked on helplessly as the 3 men died, without a complete corpse in the blink of an eye. One man was split in half from the middle, one at the waist, and the last man was split diagonally from shoulder to waist. Fresh blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. Such a cruel scene sent chills down Rinpoche's spine. At the same time, his stomach was in turmoil. The last time Long Wanli challenged the Empress, he was beaten into the ground with just 1 move. By the time he was able to move, after being poked by Caretaker Shi's electric baton, the square had already started to fill in the holes. In addition, both sides used a sword and a palm to determine the victor. Rinpoche couldn't see the duel clearly and only saw Long Wanli's back view. Even though he felt it was a pity that Long Wanli was dead, Rinpoche was more excited to see a duel between 2 experts. At this moment, what Rinpoche saw was a bloody massacre. The shock he received and the feeling of barbarism and bloodshed were far greater than the previous time. It could even be said that it was something he had never felt before in his life. He always felt that death was far away from him. Even though he almost lost his head when he first arrived in this world, he managed to survive in the end. This made him, who rarely saw death, feel a sense of alienation from it. However, it was different this time. The brutal massacre was happening in front of him. It made him realize that this world was far crueler than what he had always seen. Just as Rinpoche stood there with his mind blank, the soldiers at the side of the field had already started to clean up. They dug a hole under the broken stone slab and threw the severed limbs into it. Then, they started to fill the hole with soil. Not long after, the entire hole was filled up. All that was left was for the stonemason to install another stone slab. It wasn't until those soldiers left that the onlookers dispersed, leaving only Rinpoche standing there with ice-cold hands and feet. After a long time, Rinpoche dragged his heavy footsteps back to the beast park. Gun Gun and Tian Tian had already fallen asleep on the stone slab. Rinpoche's head was in a mess as images kept flashing through his mind. Suddenly, the horrifying scene of him being decapitated like the other 3 flashed across his mind. That scene made him feel suffocated, and he abruptly sat up on the bed. That one move made him break out in a cold sweat. No matter what, I can't become like that, like those 3 people, Rinpoche muttered to himself. This isn't Earth, it's a different world. It's not as safe as Earth, and human lives aren't that precious. In the future, I can't just laze around like this. I have to work harder and take the initiative to climb up. Only when my position is so high that others can't move will I be safe. The higher my position, the stronger my importance, the safer I will be, and the further away I will be from the threat of death. I have the backing of a civilized world that is far superior to this place. How can I continue to be muddle-headed and put my life in the hands of others? If it's possible, I want to become stronger too. Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Rinpoche's mind. Finally, they merged into one. He wanted to become stronger, have a higher position, and make himself safer. Only then would he be able to survive in this world. Even though he had such thoughts in the past, they were never as clear, firm, and real as they were now. As a youth who often had fantasies and an ordinary person, the sudden revelation of another side of this world shattered the muddle-headedness that he had been muddle-headed all this while. He felt that the things that he had been working hard and doing in the past were really too little. It was far from enough, especially after he had gotten rid of the crisis of survival and gained a foothold. He actually began to relax. He had underestimated this world. After tossing and turning for a long time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning, he was woken up by a knock on his door. He didn't sleep well that night. Even after he fell asleep, everything that happened at the scene would surface in his mind from time to time, forming a dream. When he woke up, he realized that he was drenched in sweat. He picked up a bowl of water and gulped it down. Rinpoche got up and pushed open the door. He saw Caretaker Sure outside. "Why is your face so pale?" Caretaker Sure looked at Rinpoche and asked curiously, "Maybe I caught a cold last night. Your small physique is too weak." Caretaker Sure laughed boorishly. "The Imperial Kitchen asked you to visit them when you are free." Rinpoche nodded. "I got it. I will go after I finish my work at the Honlu Bureau today." "Brother Ren, you can arrange for me to come over." Caretaker Sure waved his hand and left. Rinpoche looked at Caretaker Sure's back as he left. Caretaker Sure still treated him the same as before, but he felt that something was different. It was because his state of mind was different. The Aboriginals had a warm side, a straightforward and adorable side, but also a cruel side. This was what he felt just now. After washing up, he picked up his official robe. This was what he relied on to survive. After putting on his robe, he left the Beast Park. When he passed by the plaza, he could still smell the lingering smell of blood in the air. However, he didn't show any signs of abnormality. When he arrived at the Honlu Bureau, he picked up the book, 300 Song Poems, and continued to memorize it. After a while, he felt tired and went to the backyard to watch some people from the Honlu Bureau practice martial arts. Xiongpai was still playing with that rock that weighed 2 to 3 tons. No one came to the Honlu Bureau for the whole day. Mr. Emptiness and Ning Kaichun, who arrived earlier, didn't have anything to do. Rinpoche was happy to stay in his room. In the afternoon, he reckoned that it was almost time. He bade farewell and went straight to the Imperial Kitchen. When Rinpoche arrived, the Imperial Kitchen had just delivered dinner to the Empress. Everyone was sitting there resting. When they saw Rinpoche, they greeted him one after another. "Brother Ren." "The greetings of Brother Run." Rinpoche smiled and asked, "Where's Caretaker go?" "He went to deliver dinner to Her Majesty." Looking at the time, "He should be back soon," someone immediately replied. Rinpoche nodded his head. "Are you looking for me because of Her Majesty's birthday banquet?" "Brother Ren, it's like this. Caretaker Go hopes that you can participate in making some dishes. After all, we have just familiarized ourselves with your spices. Now that Her Majesty's birthday banquet is just around the corner, we don't have time to slowly experiment." Rinpoche nodded his head, found a place to sit down, and waited for Caretaker Go to return. Not long after, Caretaker Go came back and saw Rinpoche. His face twitched for a long time, and he called out, "Brother Ren." "Forget it. Call me Storyteller Ren in the future. This is my current position in the palace." Ren Baqien waved his hand and said, "Seeing that you are in a difficult position, I won't make things difficult for you." Chapter 79. Ren Baqien tilted his head and looked at him. "Then why did you look like you were eating sh*t just now?" "Up to you." Ren Baqien shrugged. "Brother Run, the dishes for Her Majesty's birthday banquet." Caretaker Go called out again. This time, he was much more straightforward. It seemed like the hurdle in his heart had been overcome. "Make two, one normal and one unorthodox. Let's see if those people are to Her Majesty's liking. If Her Majesty is happy, we won't torture them. If Her Majesty is unhappy, they can forget about having a good meal," Ren Baqien said. Upon hearing Ren Baqien's words, everyone in the imperial kitchen laughed. "How are the arrangements for the banquet? How many people to a table? How many dishes?" Ren Baqien asked again. "A table for two, 6 dishes, and a bowl of soup for each person. Her Majesty said that this year's banquet will be different from previous years," Caretaker Go said. Ren Baqien nodded his head. This wasn't much. It was simply too easy to come up with 6 main dishes from the Chinese menu. Any birthday banquet or wedding banquet would have at least a dozen dishes. Meatballs, 4 happiness meatballs, twice cooked pork, and so on. He was sure that the tongues of those who came would be swallowed. Ren Baqien stayed in the imperial kitchen until midnight. He first picked 8 dishes and let the imperial kitchen chefs practice making them. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and make them into the menu. As for the other menu, Ren Baqien was prepared to go back and study the dark cuisine. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and 1 soup. If he chose this, Ren Baqien was confident that he would definitely give those who came this time an unforgettable experience. A rather unforgettable kind. He guaranteed that they would come back to the banquet next year after eating their fill. The following morning, Ren Baqien was listening to Ning Kaichen brag. It seemed that he realized that Ren Baqien was the only one who could listen to him after going 1 round yesterday. Early in the morning, he came over not long after Ren Baqien arrived and told Ren Baqien the legendary stories of his journey. Ren Baqien was very interested in many of the things he talked about. For example, the local conditions and customs of various places. In the morning, a large group of carriages entered Lan City. The convoy first stopped at a location on Jingyang Street. There were 3 shops there, and all of them were sealed with seals on their doors. The signboard above said Wan Jialu. A man with a mustache and wearing a purple silk robe came down from the carriage. With his hands behind his back, he raised his head and looked at the 3 sealed shops. "Third uncle, is this our family business in Lan City?" A man came down from the other 2 carriages. They were both in their 20s, one handsome and the other handsome. "Not bad. Your third uncle and the others are all in prison. This time, we came for this matter," the man called fifth uncle said. "These barbarians," one of the valiant-looking young men said indignantly, his face filled with anger. "Silence. This isn't our home. Remember, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. If something happens to you here, no one can save you." The middle-aged man frowned. "I know I was wrong." The valiant man quickly lowered his head and said, "You two know what we're going to do this time, right?" The middle-aged man asked. "I know, but fifth uncle, is that Qi Zixiao really as beautiful as a flower?" The handsome young man asked. "Not just that. When I came to Dayo in the past, I saw her from afar. She was an exceptional beauty. I brought you 2 here just in case. Don't think too much about it. There are a lot of talented young men with the same idea in every country. Now, the Yun Nation's imperial court is in chaos. That man alone holds power and rejects dissidents. The undercurrent is surging, and we have no choice but to find a place to retreat. There are many wealthy families in Great Xia. Even though we have already made arrangements, it won't be easy to gain a foothold. I was the one who strongly advocated for Dayo. Dayo doesn't lack brave generals and warriors, but lacks capable people who can govern the country. Even though the current Empress of Dayo is a young woman, her breadth of mind is far from that of an ordinary person. If the 2 of you can display your talents and interest her, you might be able to gain a foothold in Dayo. Unfortunately, Even though your third uncle has been managing the business for many years, he is greedy by nature. Not only did he lose himself, but he also lost the business here. The reputation of the Zhang family has also been ruined by him. This time, we are here mainly to salvage the situation here. As for the rest, it's fine as long as you know it. There's no need to force it. Got it, fifth uncle. We believe what you said. In our family, fifth uncle's foresight and knowledge are incomparable to others. We are well aware of it. However, there's a little doubt. If we stay here and people find out, I'm afraid we won't be able to explain to our family, the handsome young man said after they looked at each other. You don't have to worry too much about this. I found 2 people early on who are enough to impersonate you in the family. As long as you live in seclusion, you don't have to worry about being discovered. Even if people find out about your situation here, it's just a coincidence that you have the same name and looks. The family can still settle this matter. Let's go to the Honlu Bureau. The middle-aged man waved his hand at them and ended the conversation. After they returned to the car, their hearts weren't calm. They knew what the middle-aged man meant. He wanted them to find an official position here. Even though they didn't like this barren land, they had no other choice for the sake of their family. However, they were curious about Qi Zixiao, whom the middle-aged man called an exceptional beauty. They wanted to see what the Empress of Dayo, who was praised so highly by their fifth uncle, looked like. The carriage arrived at the Honlu Bureau. A moment later, Rinpochian received the news and went out with Xiongpai. At a glance, he saw the 3 people standing at the entrance and the carriage a little further away. In the middle was a middle-aged man with an elegant face and a mustache. The 2 youths behind him were extremely good-looking. They are here to use their beauty trap. Rinpochian thought to himself when he saw the 2 of them. They are trying to snatch my food. I have to suppress them even without Her Majesty's orders. The other party was stunned when they saw him. This Honlu deputy wasn't an aboriginal, nor was he a remnant citizen of the Hao Nation. He looked more like someone from Great Xia or the Yun Nation. This meant that someone was 1 step ahead of them. This thought emerged in the minds of the few of them. How do I address the few of you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Rinpochian asked calmly. He was neither indifferent nor enthusiastic. I'm Zhang Junzheng. These 2 are from the same family, Zhang Heqi and Zhang Heju. They know that Her Majesty's birthday is in a few days, so they specially brought gifts from the Yun Nation. May I know how to address you, sir? My surname is Ren, Rinpochian. You can also call me Deputy Ren. Rinpochian smiled politely. Sir Ren, that's a good name. The Kuan Pong spreads its wings for 8,000 miles and will definitely soar to the top. Zhang Heju, the handsome youth, praised. Chapter 80. How long has Sir Ren been in the Honlu Bureau? I've been to Lan City before, but this is the first time I've seen a foreigner serving as an official in Dayo. It's obvious that Her Majesty favors Sir Ren, which is admirable, Zhang Junzheng said with a smile as he followed Rinpochian into the Honlu Bureau with his 2 nephews. I've only been in this position for a short while. Rinpochian waved his hand. This matter couldn't be kept a secret, and anyone would find out after asking around. Oh, Zhang Junzheng's eyes flashed. I'll have to trouble you to fill out this form. Rinpochian took out 3 pieces of paper and handed it to the 3 nephews. After telling them what he needed, he sat behind the table and quietly observed them. Zhang Junzheng was the leader among them, but this time, the main characters were probably the other 2 gigolos. Where do you want to stay? Do you have a place to stay? Rinpochian asked after seeing them finish writing. I'll have to trouble sir to arrange it. Zhang Junzheng cupped his hands. Xiongpai, bring them to the 2 courtyards beside Ning Kai-chun, Rinpochian instructed. All right, deputy, come with me, Xiongpai shouted at the few of them. Thank you, sir. Zhang Junzheng and the other 2 nephews cupped their hands. Rinpochian nodded and fell into deep thought after they left. These people looked like they came from big clans. They were different from ordinary people and had a sense of propriety in their words and actions. Even though they had always treated him with courtesy, Rinpochian didn't have a good impression of them. It was entirely due to the changes in his mentality over the past 2 days that made him feel a sense of crisis. At the same time, he was also thinking about a problem. Now that he was an official in Dayo, what about the people from other nations? Could they? There weren't any in the past, but that didn't mean that there wouldn't be any in the future. In the afternoon, two groups of people arrived one after another. One group was from Great Xia and had the surname Lian. The other group was also from the Yun nation and had the surname Hong. Like the Zhang family, these two groups of people came in a long line with carriages and horses. They also brought a lot of goods or gifts. Ren Baqian asked Xiongpai to bring them over. When Xiongpai returned, he muttered, "Sir, those bastards don't know what's good for them. They actually complain that the conditions are too simple and crude. They're all like this. In my opinion, it's already not bad, but they're still complaining about this and that." Ren Baqian squinted his eyes slightly. He knew that Xiongpai was talking about the people from the Lian family who had just been sent over. From a young master of the Lian family to the servants, all of them had an arrogant look on their faces, especially that young master of the Lian family. His eyeballs were almost on top of his head. "Next time, let them find their own accommodation," Ren Baqian said casually. That night, Ren Baqian handed over the task to someone else and returned to Earth. For the past 3 days, he had been studying and thinking in his room. His mind was completely focused on that world. There were too many aspects to consider. In the past, he was like a spinning top that would only spin once the rope was pulled. Other than saving his own life, his other thoughts were only to create something that existed on Earth or how to earn money. He had never systematically considered what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. However, during these 3 days on Earth, he had figured out his future path. What he was good at was nothing more than relying on the Earth and being famous in the world. As for other aspects, needless to say, he reckoned that no one in Dayo above the age of 10 was weaker than him. As for intellect, he was just an ordinary person with no foresight or wisdom. All he had was the technology, culture, and various theoretical knowledge that had been developed on Earth. This was the only thing that he could show that would make people value him. Even though the individual strength in this world was very strong, they were far from being strong enough to ignore technology. Technology was also very important to them, and culture and various theories were equally important to Dayo. In the past, he was thinking of doing something to earn some money and please the Empress. But now, it seemed that those were just small things. If he wanted people to value him, he had to systematically improve the various aspects of Dayo's technology and academic knowledge. Only in this way could his position not be shaken by anything and not be affected by anything. Of course, cozying up to the Empress was indispensable. In this world, he knew nothing, had nothing, and had no foundation at all. In this short period of time, only by cozying up to the Empress would he be safe and sound and be able to do things that could show his value. Ren Baqian thought about it a lot. Even though there were still some flaws and it wasn't very comprehensive, he already had a clear goal. The rest could only be slowly perfected in the future. When he returned to that world again, his eyes were clear and he completely knew what to do and how to do it. "Yeah, Brother Ren, you seem a little different today," Caretaker sure said curiously when he saw Ren Baqian in the morning. "I have figured out some things that I have never understood," Ren Baqian said with a smile. "If you can't figure out, just throw it aside. When the time comes, you will know what to do," Caretaker sure said indifferently, causing Ren Baqian to smile. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, Qi Heng and Qi Sheng were still standing at the entrance. When they saw him, they greeted him one after another. "Did anyone come yesterday?" Ren Baqian asked casually. There was a group of carriages and a group of 3 people riding on horses. "I saw Xiongpai bringing them away." "It should have been arranged," Qi Heng replied. Ren Baqian nodded his head to indicate that he understood. When he entered the deputy's room, a burly man was sitting behind the table with a sluggish look on his face. If he drooled, he would be a living retard. Ren Baqian patted the table. "Official registrar, she." That burly man quivered. When he saw that it was Ren Baqian, he hurriedly stood up and said, "Deputy Ren, you are back. Have you settled the matter?" "Yes," Ren Baqian said faintly. "Did anything happen yesterday?" This person was the official registrar of the Honglu Bureau. Ren Baqian asked him to make the arrangements yesterday. The reason was very easy to find. The Empress was arranging other matters. In any case, it was impossible for him to confront the Empress. The Empress also knew that he would disappear once every few days. 2 groups of people came yesterday. I have arranged for them to go over, that burly man said. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Thank you very much. Rinpoche revealed a smile. The burly man grinned at Rinpoche. Without saying anything else, he immediately left the house. Rinpoche walked 1 round in the house and then came to the backyard. Sure enough, Xiongpai was playing with that huge rock there. When he saw Rinpoche, he hurriedly threw the huge rock like a rubber ball and ran over. You continue with your training. I will take a look here, Rinpoche said as he felt the huge rock landing on the ground. In the afternoon, when Rinpoche and Xiongpai were staying in the room, a low-ranking official who was usually in charge of the affairs at the Honglu Bureau's courier station ran over to report, "Sir, there's a fight over there." However, there wasn't much panic on his face. It seemed that he was just here to inform Rinpoche about this matter. In any case, they were all from abroad. As long as they didn't damage the courier station, the people from the Honglu Bureau wouldn't care at all. Rinpoche leaned back and asked, "Did they kill anyone?" "Sir, they weren't when I came." That person laughed. At this moment, Deputy Ren's manner of speaking was very similar to Deputy Qi Ji in the past. "What happened?" Rinpoche then asked. "I'm not too sure either. In any case, they quarreled for a while before fighting," that person said. "Which courtyard?" "Courtyard number 2 and 8. Rinpoche thought for a while. It was Mr. Emptiness and the people from the Lien family from Great Xia. Chapter 81. Rinpoche brought Xiongpai and the burly man named Gon Gu out of the Honglu Bureau. His footsteps were not hurried, and it was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. However, his mind was thinking about how to resolve this matter. After all, they were here to deliver gifts to the Empress. If they couldn't resolve this matter properly in a private fight, it would make them look incompetent and cause more trouble. The Honglu Bureau wasn't far from the post house. They just had to walk around the corner to get there. From afar, Rinpoche could see a group of people surrounding the place and could even hear their cheers. The group of burly men outside were mostly Dayo people. At this moment, they had turned into a crowd of onlookers, cheering and applauding one after another. However, when Rinpoche got closer, he also saw a few familiar figures. For example, Ning Caichen's petite figure was squeezing through the crowd. After spending a long time trying to squeeze through the crowd, Ning Caichen was suddenly pushed back 5 or 6 steps and fell on his butt. Ning Caichen cursed his bad luck after he got up. He realized that he couldn't squeeze through the crowd, so he jumped outside the crowd like a spring. When Rinpoche came over, he saw this scene. Suddenly, he inexplicably thought of the time when he watched Long Wanli challenge the Empress. Wasn't it the same as Ning Caichen? A feeling of empathy arose in his heart. The aboriginals were too much of a bully. Ning Caichen jumped, but he could only see a small part of the fight. This made him extremely anxious. He loved watching such a big show the most. Why was he late for such a big show? At this moment, he felt someone pat him on the back. He quickly turned his head and saw Xiongpai's wall-like figure. Soon after, he saw Rinpoche looking at him with an embarrassed expression on his face. Xiongpai's body was like a wall. Ning Caichen didn't feel embarrassed at all. When he saw Rinpoche, he quickly pulled him and said, "Deputy Run, there's a fight going on inside. I don't know if their brains are smashed. Quickly go in and see what's going on." Rinpoche looked at Ning Caichen and pondered. You can't wait for their brains to be smashed, right? You really can't judge a book by its cover. Xiongpai. Rinpoche turned his head and called out to Xiongpai. Xiongpai immediately understood. He stretched his arms forward, picked up the 2 people in front of Rinpoche, and placed them to the side. The 2 of them felt themselves being lifted into the air. They immediately turned their heads and wanted to curse, but when they saw Xiongpai's figure, they glared at him instead. With Xiongpai clearing the way, it was much easier for Rinpoche to get in. Ning Caichen, who was behind him, hurriedly followed behind. He blindly followed Rinpoche's every step for fear that he would be squeezed out again. By the time there were no more people in front of him, Rinpoche had already entered the innermost circle and was able to see the scene clearly. The one who attacked was not Mr. Emptiness, as he had expected. He was coughing up blood at the side, for delicate girls were circling around a black-clothed old man, throwing punches and palms at him. Although the black-clothed old man wasn't injured, he was trapped and unable to break out. Those 4 ladies were naturally the ones who carried the sedan. Upon seeing this scene, Rinpoche was finally sure that they weren't hired. This thought had been going around in his mind for a few days. Today, he was finally able to confirm it. As for the black-clothed old man, he was an old butler of the Lien family. He had extraordinary skills, and if it weren't for the tacit cooperation of these 4 ladies, it would have been difficult to trap him. However, they were only able to trap him. Mr. Lien Baocheng, who was at the back, was watching the fight with a fierce look on his face. He wasn't happy that he couldn't deal with these ladies even after such a long time. At this moment, someone beside him said something. He looked up and immediately saw Xiong Pai's huge figure. If this barbarian was here, then the deputy would definitely be here as well. A ruthless look flashed across Lien Baocheng's face. Lien Baocheng beat them to death. Everyone in the crowd immediately heard this sentence. A few beautiful ladies actually wanted to beat them to death. How vicious and merciless. When Rinpoche heard this, he was stunned. He looked to the opposite side and saw that Lien Baocheng had just shifted his gaze to the side as if he didn't see Rinpoche. However, Rinpoche clearly saw Lien Baocheng shifting his gaze away from him. With Xiong Pai's huge figure, it was impossible for him not to see it. When Rinpoche thought about how Lien Baocheng had complained a few days ago, he sneered in his heart. Was he trying to humiliate him? At this moment, the situation of the battle suddenly changed. Following Lien Baocheng's shout, although Lien Cheng's aura didn't change, his moves became much more ferocious. Suddenly, a delicate cry was heard. One of the young ladies flipped backward, and a white light flashed from her abdomen to her neck. Her clothes were cut into 2, and her breasts were exposed. However, a line of blood spurted out from the abdomen of that young lady. At this moment, everyone realized that there was a soft sword in Lien Baocheng's hand. Like a venomous snake, it tried to bite the other 3. If this young lady hadn't dodged in time, her abdomen would have been cut open. Even now, she was still severely injured. Originally, the 4 young ladies could only trap Lien Baocheng, who was unarmed. Now that there was one less person and Lien Baocheng had a weapon in his hand, the situation immediately changed. The few of them were immediately surrounded by danger. In just a short while, a few more wounds appeared on their bodies. Seeing this situation, Mr. Emptiness coughed even more violently. Originally, he was using a handkerchief to cover his mouth. The handkerchief was stained with traces of blood, but now he directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. Like a sharp arrow, it wasn't shot toward the old man in the middle of the battlefield, but directly toward Lien Baocheng's face. "Be careful, mister," someone suddenly shouted from the side. A burly man unsheathed his long saber and blocked the blood arrow. When the blood arrow hit the long saber, it immediately lost its strength and fell to the ground. Then, a scene that shocked everyone happened. The place where the blood splashed on the long saber seemed to have melted. First it softened. Then, half of the long saber fell to the ground with a clang. Lien Baocheng was shocked by this situation. If even a steel saber was like this, he would shudder in fear if the blood were to hit him. A streak of green flashed across his face. His gaze toward Mr. Emptiness was filled with a wild, murderous intent. Rinpoche was also surprised. How was that blood that was spurted out? It was obviously strong acid, wasn't it? It was impossible for human blood to be corrosive. Could it be that there was also super strong gastric acid? Rinpoche had always heard the phrase, "I spit on you." Today, he had learned something new. If this Mr. Emptiness spat on someone's face, it wouldn't be as simple as disfigurement. Kill them, including that sickly guy. Go kill them. I want to hack them into pieces. Lien Baocheng had a crazy look on his face. Hearing his shout, Rinpoche knew that this show couldn't continue. If he continued to watch, his brain would really be smashed to pieces. With a gloomy face, Rinpoche turned his head and said to Xiongpai, "Stop them. If anyone dares to make a move after I shout for them to stop, kill them without mercy." This was Daeyo's imperial capital. If they continued to stir up trouble, he would be done for. Chapter 82. After Rinpoche shouted, none of the people in the field stopped, or rather, they didn't dare to stop. If they stopped, and the other party didn't, they would immediately fall into a disadvantageous position. Furthermore, they simply didn't have the time to see who shouted. Xiongpai, separate them. Those who don't listen, kill them. While Rinpoche was speaking with a gloomy face, Lien Baocheng was still hooting, "Kill them. I want to skin them to use as cushions for my chair. As for that sickly guy, I want to chop him into pieces." However, he was destined to fail. Xiongpai rushed into the group of people in a few steps. With a swing of his arm, he hit a young girl in front of him. Like a kite with a broken string, she flew out of the crowd while vomiting blood. Have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Xiongpai didn't have such a thought. In any case, he would do whatever the deputy instructed him to do. The old man in black, Lien Baocheng, saw that there was no time to lose. The flexible sword in his hand turned into a myriad of stars and went straight for the other two young girls. The two young girls shouted angrily. As they dodged the cold rays, they turned their heads to look at Xiongpai. Xiongpai directly and efficiently kicked at the old man in black. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the old man leaped into the air to avoid this kick. His flexible sword turned into a poisonous snake and went straight for Xiongpai. Regardless of whether it was for self-protection or for other reasons, he actually attacked Xiongpai. This action made Rinpoche laugh incessantly. Xiongpai let out a deep roar from his throat. This man, who had always given Rinpoche the impression of a simple and honest man, finally revealed his fangs. He simply ignored those specks of cold light, raised his hands high, and directly hammered down. Although Lien Baqian used his arms to block in time, how could he withstand Xiongpai's brute force? Bang! Everyone in the field felt the ground under their feet shake. Lien Baqian was smashed into the ground by Xiongpai. "Lian Yulinchi, stop, come back." "Cough, cough." Mr. Emptiness shouted. Because their sisters were sent flying, they were hesitating whether to attack Xiongpai or the seriously injured Lien Baqian. "Mister." Even though the two young girls knew that they were no match for Xiongpai, they still glared at him fiercely before obeying his order to retreat. Rinpoche frowned as he walked into the field. "What's going on?" No one answered. When the surrounding Daeyo people saw a foreigner dressed in a Daeyo official's uniform walking into the arena, they curiously inquired about him and found out that he was the newly appointed Honglu deputy. They continued to watch the show. Lien Baocheng looked at Lien Tong, who had half his body in the ground, and then looked at Xiongpai's huge body. After being shocked by Xiongpai's huge strength, his lips trembled for a long time. You actually dare?" "Oh, dare what?" Rinpoche looked at Lien Baocheng with a smile on his face. Then, he lowered his head to look at Lien Baocheng, who was already limp and unconscious. Rinpoche looked at Lien Baocheng with pity and said, "What a pity. You actually attacked Xiongpai and got beaten up so badly." "TSK, TSK, TSK. Rinpoche sighed. "It's quite painful to live like this. Trample him to death and help him to be free." Rinpoche's words were completely different from what he had said before, and everyone immediately fell silent. Lien Baocheng, Ning Kaichun, and even the people from the Zhang and Han clans standing at the side felt a chill down their spines. They suddenly felt that this Honglu deputy, who looked easy to bully, was actually a vicious wolf who would devour people without spitting out the bones. "How dare you? How dare you? I'll kill your entire family." Lien Baocheng jumped up as if his tail had been stepped on and clamored at Rinpoche. Xiongpai had a few bloody scars on his body, but he acted as if he didn't feel them. Just by looking at the hideous scars on his body, one could guess that this kind of injury had almost no effect on him. Rinpoche grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He lifted his leg and stepped on Lien Baocheng's exposed chest. "Kacha!" First, Xiongpai's bone shattered. Then, like a water bag being stepped on, fresh blood spurted out from his 5 orifices. Rin Bachien suppressed the disgust in his heart and revealed a calm and unruffled smile. He looked at Lien Baocheng and said, "Attacking an official of the Honglu Bureau in Dayo. You guys are really gutsy. Do you think there's no one capable in Dayo?" Seeing Rin Bachien smile, even Lien Baocheng, who had a lawless temperament, felt his heart tremble. Following which, his heart was filled with rage and endless humiliation. That's his normal reaction after being attacked. Lien Baocheng squeezed out these few words from the gaps of his teeth. Ever since he was young, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He had never been humiliated like this before. The rage in his heart was about to ignite his entire body. If it wasn't for Rin Bachien's words that woke him up a little, he would have already gone crazy. Xiongpai's reaction is also normal. He was stomped to death by your order. Lien Baocheng felt as if his heart was on fire. He felt like he was going to explode in the next moment. There must be a punishment for attacking an official, isn't there? Otherwise, if anyone did this for no reason, where would the dignity of Dayo be? Rin Bachien smiled and walked in front of Lien Baocheng. The surrounding Dayo people all laughed. They felt that this Honglu Bureau deputy, who looked like a foreigner, was a good person and they liked him very much. This time, I'm here to participate in the birthday celebration of the Dayo Emperor. I brought a gift with me. I'll definitely report your actions to the higher-ups. My great Xia's envoy will also inform your emperor. Lien Baocheng's face was flushed and his eyes were bloodshot. His mind was spinning quickly on how to kill this bastard in front of him. Not only did he have to die, but his entire family had to die as well. Rin Bachien touched Lien Baocheng's cheek. This action made the surrounding people feel disgusted. Therefore, before that, you have to be careful and don't commit any more crimes. Otherwise, I'll throw you into prison and the gift you brought will still belong to Her Majesty. However, by then, you might not be the one to send it to the Emperor. As for the rest, you can do whatever you want. Rin Bachien laughed. Rin Bachien's words made Lien Baocheng feel as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. Rin Bachien walked back to the center of the square and said, "I don't care how this incident happened today. I hope that all of you and the people who will come after you know that no matter what your status is in your own country or how tyrannical you usually are, you have to remember that this is Dayo. Whether you're a dragon or a tiger, you have to crouch down. I don't care if you guys fight to death outside, but don't create trouble for me here." After Rin Bachien finished speaking, the surrounding people were dead silent. Following which, those Dayo people who were watching the commotion cheered loudly. Rin Bachien revealed a smile to the surrounding people. He softened his voice and said gently, "Everyone here isn't an ordinary person. Treat yourself better. If you want to make things difficult for yourself, don't do it here. Xiongpai, let's go." Rin Bachien snapped his fingers and walked outside. At the same time, he didn't forget to shout, "Gonggu, let the Public Order Bureau handle this matter." "Yes, sir." The burly man called Gonggu quickly replied. This Sir Rin had just been appointed not long ago. They had discussed about him in private and more or less looked down on him. After this incident, he realized that this Sir Rin was much more ruthless than what he looked like on the surface. He really liked the way Rin Bachien handled today. Chapter 83. Rin Bachien left the crowd. After turning a corner, his face started to turn pale and his back started to sweat profusely. He never thought that he would actually do such a thing. Even he was shocked by what he did just now and even felt that it was terrifying. Those words, that behavior, it was completely unlike what he would do. Once he returned to the Honglu Bureau, he immediately rushed to the toilet and retched. Just now, he was beside him and personally gave the order to step on a person like a cockroach. Although he deliberately did not lower his head to look at that scene, the sound was still transmitted to his ears. That final sound somewhat sounded like a persimmon being crushed. Thinking of the scene of the persimmon being crushed, he immediately vomited. After a long time, he finally came out of the toilet with a forehead full of sweat. He did not know if what he did today was right. However, he knew that he had to intimidate those people. For example, Lien Baoqing's family had a huge influence in the local area. He had been spoiled since he was young and was used to being tyrannical. If he did not intimidate him, who knew what would happen in the following days? Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. Those who came from afar were definitely not ordinary people. Among them, there were not many who were kind. Just like that Mr. Emptiness, if not for Xiong Pai by his side that day, he would have already gotten into trouble. There were about 13 days left before the Empress's birthday celebration. At this time, not many people had arrived. In a few days, there would be more people. Who knows, there might be many who had a feud with each other. Even if there was no feud, there might be conflicts because of their different styles. This was the first task that the Empress assigned to him. He absolutely could not mess it up and had to do it well, no matter what method he used. Previously, he thought that it would be enough to suppress the other party by reciting poems. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly felt that it was somewhat ridiculous. He had really thought too simply. Perhaps those people had really received more than 10 years of education, but in essence, they were not ordinary students. It was hard to say what they would do. At the same time, Rinpoche also began to think about why the Empress assigned him to do this. After thinking for a long time, he still could not figure out the main point. In any case, he should just do what that person instructed him to do. Instead of thinking about this, he might as well think about whether the gift he gave the Empress was suitable or not. Not long after Rinpoche left, the people from the Public Order Bureau arrived. At this moment, more than half of the crowd had already dispersed. Lien Baoqing left with an ashen face after Rinpoche left. He didn't even bring Lien Baoqing's corpse with him. Of course, he still had to stay in Dayo for so many days. He couldn't possibly leave a corpse by his side every day. Coupled with the weather in Dayo, it was estimated that the house would be uninhabitable within 2 days. Although 2 of Mr. Emptiness's subordinates were injured, it was still much better than Lien Baoqing's losing face and his right-hand man. After pacifying the 2 maids, she felt a deep fear of Rinpoche. The previous probing had made him feel that the Chamberlain of Dependency's deputy was putting on a brave front, but his actions today made him look at him in a different light. He would no longer think that way again. Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. Although the people of Dayo were barbaric and overbearing in the past, that was all there was to it. It wasn't like something like today hadn't happened before, but at most, they would be whipped a few times after they separated. However, Rinpoche was different. At that time, the feeling he gave them was that of a wolf that would swallow people whole without spitting out the bones. He was filled with a sinister aura. The reason why they felt this way was because of the contrast between Rinpoche's usual behavior and his behavior at that time. This kind of contrast made them feel that Rinpoche was originally this kind of person. That afternoon, the Empress was in the palace looking at a piece of paper that recorded Rinpoche's actions. And below her was Gu Daxiong, who was known to not care about anything. Interesting. The Empress laughed. Rinpoche's actions this time made her feel that it was interesting. Even she didn't expect that Rinpoche would actually do such a thing. It was different from what she originally thought. However, this made her feel that it was very interesting. Gu Daxiong, who was below, heard the Empress's words and laughed. This deputy Rin looks like a weakling, but when he does things, he is rather straightforward. Originally, I was a little worried, but now, I can wash my hands of this matter. Let him do what he wants, the Empress said indifferently. Yes, Gu Daxiong replied. At the same time, in the residence of Great Xia's envoy in Dayo, Lien Baoqing had a ferocious look on his face. That Honglu deputy with the surname Run, I want him dead. Is there any way? Sitting opposite Lien Baoqing was a man in his 30s. He had a beard and slightly tanned skin. In fact, before coming to Dayo, he wasn't like this. However, after staying in Dayo for a long time, it was fine if he didn't want to be tanned. His name was Gu Zicheng. At this moment, he was looking at Lien Baoqing with a smile. Do you think this is Great Xia? It is precisely because this is Dayo that I came to look for you. You can state your conditions, for example, helping you return to Great Xia? Lien Baoqing said. Gu Zicheng shook his head slightly, Even though your proposal is very tempting, and I have long been sick of this damn place, I still have to say that this is Dayo, not Great Xia. This is the territory of those barbarians. Creating trouble here is tantamount to seeking death. They won't care about your identity. You should have experienced this before. Let me give you a suggestion. Swallow your anger first. Lien Baocheng stared intently at Gu Zicheng. After a while, he said, "Then you can stay here until you die." After Lien Baocheng left, a young man in a loose robe with big sleeves walked in from the next room and sat opposite Gu Zicheng. "Your Highness." Gu Zicheng bowed his head. "No need to be so courteous." The man who was addressed as Your Highness laughed. "This generation of the Lien family is really good for nothing. Each of them is worse than the other." He was the 7th prince of Great Xia. No one would have thought that he would leave his attendants and convoy behind and travel lightly to Lan City. Hearing him say this, Gu Zicheng also laughed. The Lien family was also a wealthy and influential family in Great Xia. They had stood tall for hundreds of years and produced talented people in every generation. However, this generation of youngsters was indeed good for nothing. However, I am really interested in this deputy Ron. The 7th prince smiled. "I don't know much either. I have heard that this person was sent to prison more than a month ago. After that, he was brought out to stay in the Beast Park for some time and became the Honglu deputy. Before that, no one knew anything about him. Speaking of which, it is really weird." The 7th prince squinted his eyes slightly. Suddenly, a person like this popped out from a rock. He spoke softly and then laughed. If Rinpochian saw the 7th prince at this moment, he would definitely be shocked. This was because other than his hairstyle and temperament, the 7th prince's face was exactly the same as his. There was almost no difference, as if they were carved from the same mold. When the 7th prince saw Rinpochian from afar, he felt this way. Therefore, Rinpochian's current position in his heart was second only to the purpose of his visit to Dayo. A person who looked exactly like him made him feel a little weird. It was enough to have one person in this world. There was no need for another person who looked exactly like him. Chapter 84. Rinpochian naturally did not know what was happening in other places. From that day onwards, he started to get busy. He could not even care about the air coolers anymore. After Tong Jia made the outer shell, he threw it to caretaker Shi. As for the price, it was 15 taels of silver each. Anyway, the people who bought it weren't ordinary people. It didn't matter if it was expensive. The production method of this thing was too simple. It could only earn a sum of money. As long as it was sold, there would definitely be imitations. Although Dayo people weren't good at doing business, they weren't stupid. They just needed to find someone to make this thing. Almost all the money was under their feet. They would at least know how to bend their backs. Even if Dayo people were really stupid, there were still merchants from other countries. Rinpochian's mind wasn't on this. Although a few hundred taels of silver wasn't a small amount, it wasn't very important to him. What he didn't know was that when caretaker Shi placed this thing in the newly renovated shop on Jingyang Avenue, it immediately attracted the interest of many people, especially after it was demonstrated that it could produce cold air with ice cubes. Out of a total of 20 air coolers, 7 were sold on the first day. The remaining 13 were completely sold the next day. It was much faster than what Rinpochian initially expected. In fact, there was one thing that he didn't know. Ever since the Empress gave the air coolers to the Empress, she often used them even during court sessions. The other officials had long been envious of them. When the air coolers were placed in the shop, they were immediately sold out after being discovered. 20 air coolers earned more than 200 taels of silver. Caretaker Shi's eyes immediately turned red, and he hurriedly looked for Rinpochian. Upon hearing this news, Rinpochian was somewhat surprised. He already knew that the air coolers would definitely be sold. However, he didn't expect them to be sold out so quickly. He asked caretaker Shi to go to the previous shop and order another 100 air coolers. He reckoned that they would still be able to catch up with the sales. After leaving the matter to caretaker Shi, Rinpochian continued to deal with the affairs of the Honglu Bureau. As the day of the Empress's birthday approached, more and more people arrived in Lan City. Many of them were originally from families with businesses in Dayo. As their own caravans frequently came and went, they were very accurate with their timing. Usually, they would arrive about a week in advance. At this point in time, there were already more than 70 batches of people arriving in Lan City. Most of them came in convoy after convoy. Other than the gifts and people that were to celebrate the Empress's birthday, there were also a large number of goods. The Empress's birthday celebration was in a week's time. Rinpoche reckoned that there would be a lot of people coming during these last few days. After a while, he would be able to get rid of this stall. Rinpoche put down his brush, stretched himself, and yawned. These days, he was indeed a little busy. After all, things were different from before. Nowadays, he had to make decisions on many matters, arrange personnel, and even mediate disputes. Just as he had thought, none of the people who could come here were ordinary people, and none of them were kind. They were all used to being domineering in their own homes. What are you looking at? What's wrong with looking at you? What do you think? Cut you up. Charge. Almost 9 out of 10 disputes started with something like this. There were many powerful people in this world, and Rinpoche had met a few of them recently. However, all kinds of arrogant and despotic young masters who were originally at home fighting chickens and walking dogs couldn't change their behavior when they came here. Even in China, a place with advanced information technology, there were many of such people, let alone in a feudal society. Basically, they only wandered around within 100 miles of their homes. Even though they had learned a lesson from the mistakes of others, they couldn't care less when they were hot-blooded. These few days, Rinpoche hanged 3 people to death. They were hanged alive. Xiongpai wrapped a rope around their necks and lifted them up. The 3 people started to struggle continuously until they finally breathed their last. Such a way of handling things gave many hot-blooded young masters a huge shock. It made them feel like they had seen a ghost when they saw Rinpoche. Rinpoche's methods were really too ruthless, but he still had a good-natured look on his face at all times. Even when he was ordering people to kill, his expression didn't change at all. It was not uncommon for them to kill people, and some of them had even done it with their own hands. However, Rinpoche's behavior still made them feel a chill in their hearts, especially when there was a monster like Xiongpai behind him. After a few times of this, no matter what happened, as long as Rinpoche and Xiongpai stood there, everyone would immediately scatter like birds and beasts. What had happened in the past few days had spread throughout Lan City. Many people knew that the Honglu Bureau had an additional deputy who looked gentle, but was actually cruel and merciless. As for those young masters from the other 3 countries, they hated Rinpoche to death and wished they could slice him to death with a knife. They had thought about how they would deal with Rinpoche if he fell into their hands. If it was really as they thought, it would be hard for Rinpoche to die if he fell into their hands. However, they had no choice but to lower their heads now that they were under the eaves. At this moment, these young masters knew that Rinpoche was at least more powerful than them in Lan City. They couldn't help but be convinced. In the past, during the Empress's birthday celebrations, there would always be people who caused a lot of trouble. However, this year, there were much fewer. Even the Public Order Bureau was very surprised. In a village on a mountain that was a day's journey away from Lan City, Qi Ji was carving a puppet with a small knife. Not long after, he heard a commotion at the entrance. A burly man rode a horse into the village and jumped off. He strode toward Qi Ji and said, "Rascal, you are very carefree here." Qi Ji immediately laughed and said, "It's much more comfortable than dealing with those bastards. I finally don't have to see those bastards this year. In my opinion, Her Majesty might as well throw me into the army. I will be more comfortable there." "Who asked you to lose that time?" Qi Ji's face immediately turned black when he heard that burly man's words. "How's the Honglu Bureau? That rascal hasn't been tormented to death by those people, right?" Qi Ji changed the topic. That burly man's expression immediately became a little strange when he heard this. "What's wrong?" Qi Ji asked curiously when he saw his expression. That bunch of fellows are like mice seeing a cat when they see that rascal now." Qi Ji's curiosity was immediately piqued when he heard this. "What's going on? When I was around, those bastards never behaved themselves. They gave me trouble every day and couldn't wait to strangle each and every one of them to death. That burly man laughed and told him some of the things he knew. Those bastards are all scared to death. Every one of them is scared to death when they see him. As long as he stands there, they don't even need to say a word. No matter what dispute there is, they will just turn around and leave. Chiji touched his short stubble and scolded, "Damn it, I broke 4 people's legs last year, but that bunch of fellows didn't even take it seriously. They really think that I am easy to bully. Next year, if there is any more trouble, I will just kill them. If not for the fact that they were gifts to Her Majesty, do you think I won't kill them?" That burly man laughed again and then shook his head. "You can't scare them. You're just a little unreasonable and tyrannical, and you kill people cleanly. But that rascal is different. He is like a snake. I didn't see it live, but I heard them say that the rascal had a smile on his face and asked Xiongpai to put a rope around the necks of the people and hang them to death. He just used a big knife to chop them. There is nothing scary about that. He's smiling at you, asking about your well-being, and stabbing you with a knife. That's how scary it is." Chiji threw the knife in his hand forward and stabbed it into a wooden board. He seemed to feel aggrieved that he was actually not as good as that weak rascal. "Damn it, I originally thought that the rascal would be tortured badly and wondered why Her Majesty didn't send someone more powerful. I didn't expect him to be so powerful." Chiji scolded and then slapped the burly man's leg. "But who did you learn this from?" "The people from the Qin Nation said it. I learned it from them," the burly man said with a smile. Chapter 85. When it was almost nighttime, Rinpochian was summoned to the palace. Once he entered the palace, he saw the Empress dressed in red muslin standing in front of a table. On top of the table was a painting. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Rinpochian greeted. The Empress turned around and sized up Rinpochian. Then, she nodded her head and said, "I haven't seen you for a few days. You look more like you now. Since I am working for Her Majesty, I have to look presentable. Otherwise, I will embarrass Her Majesty," Rinpochian said. "Well said and well done," the Empress praised. "As long as Your Majesty doesn't blame me for acting rashly. If you were afraid, you would have come to beg for forgiveness long ago." The Empress curled her lips. "These days, I have been wholeheartedly thinking about completing the task Your Majesty has given me. How could I care about anything else? Even if Your Majesty really wants to blame me, I have to settle the matter first," Rinpochian quickly said. Once again, the Empress shifted her gaze from the painting to Rinpochian. "If you're telling the truth, I will be very happy. Of course it's the truth. I don't dare to hide anything from His Majesty. I will speak my mind." The Empress was noncommittal. She would be a fool if she believed everything that Rinpochian said. Rinpochian was naturally aware of this. However, no matter how many times he tried to flatter someone, flattering them more and showing his loyalty would always bring him a lot of benefits. It was just a few words, nothing more. He felt that if he had been as smart and quick-witted as he was now, he wouldn't have been so miserable. The Empress turned around and returned to her couch. She stretched out her palm, and Hong Wan immediately poured a cup of wine and placed it in her hand. This wasn't the first time Rinpochian had seen such a scene. He had always been curious about how Qing Yuan and Hong Wan knew when the Empress wanted something. Furthermore, looking at the Empress's expression, their every move was exactly what she wanted. It can't be a roundworm in my stomach, right? However, this ability was what he was striving for. Although no one has reported you these 2 days, they will probably come when the time comes. What do you think I should do? Although you did a good job, they were all gifts for me. If I let them go out with a belly full of complaints, it would be inexcusable. But we don't want to punish you. After all, you're working for us, and what you're doing is to our liking. Tell me, what should I do? When Rinpochian heard what the Empress said, his mind spun. There seemed to be only one path in front of him. Admit your guilt and accept the punishment. Even though the Empress wouldn't really punish him and was just saying it to test his thoughts, Rinpochian knew that the Empress wouldn't punish him. If she were to be punished, the Empress would lose face. He worked for her, but in the end, he had to take the blame. When had the Emperor of Dayo ever done such a thing? Dayo had always given people the impression of being rude and overbearing. He had never cared about what others thought. Ren Baqien raised his head and said to the Empress, "With your Majesty's dignity, why would you care about the opinions of others, let alone those thieves and rascals? Will His Majesty give them an explanation?" After hearing Ren Baqian's reply, the Empress revealed a smile on her face. Soon after, she burst into unbridled laughter. Her red lips were on fire. At this moment, the feeling that the Empress gave him was like a ball of flame, unbridled and flamboyant. Hong Wan, give storyteller Ren a glass of wine. Ren Baqian gulped down the wine in her cup and laughed heartily. Ren Baqian took the wine cup. Just by smelling it, he knew that it was strong wine. He raised the cup with both hands and said, "Thank you for the wine, Your Majesty." After finishing his sentence, he drank the wine in one gulp. A scorching heat flowed into his stomach. Well said. Why would I care about the opinions of others when I do things? The Empress praised. Your Majesty is well versed in both literature and martial arts. No matter what you do, you have your own limits. Naturally, you don't need to care about what others think or say. Ren Baqian knew that his words had touched the Empress's heart. He immediately struck while the iron was hot. After the Empress laughed out loud, she raised another cup of wine and poured it into her mouth. There are 4 more days before the great hunt. Inform them that they can bring along a follower. Report the name list in 2 days. Ren Baqian was slightly stunned. Great hunt? He had never heard of this before. When the time comes, you have to perform well and don't embarrass me. All right, you can leave now. Yes, Your Majesty. Ren Baqian pondered as he left the palace. What was going on with this great hunt? Furthermore, Her Majesty wanted him to participate. It seemed like he had to find someone to ask. After returning to the Beast Park, Ren Baqian immediately went to look for Caretaker Sure. He saw Caretaker Sure holding a stone padlock at the entrance of the house and moving it up and down. No wonder Caretaker Sure had muscles all over his body. Ren Baqian usually did not pay attention to them. Caretaker Sure was also training his muscles every day. Sure enough, muscles were trained, not nurtured. When Caretaker Sure saw Ren Baqian, he threw the stone padlock to the side and laughed. "I'm getting old, but I'm not as strong as before. If it was 10 years ago, I wouldn't even need to exert any strength to do this." At this moment, Caretaker Sure was sweating profusely and panting a little. Sometimes, when Ren Baqian looked at these aboriginals, he felt that it was time for him to train. However, after thinking about it, even if he became a muscle maniac, he wouldn't be able to withstand a slap. If there was an opportunity, it would be better to get some martial arts manuals from this world. At least he wouldn't be too weak to fight a chicken. "How's the matter with the air cooler?" Ren Baqian asked. "We have produced 30 air coolers in the past few days and sold more than 20 of them. The remaining ones will probably be sold tomorrow." Caretaker Sure was excited when he mentioned this. Ren Baqian nodded his head. He estimated that it was about time. A total of more than 40 air coolers have been sold. There should be imitations soon. However, with so many young masters coming over recently, if they knew about this air cooler, they would not be stingy to buy one. It should be able to sell for a while. This air cooler should be able to earn at least 1,000 taels of silver. Caretaker Sure, I have something to ask. What's the great hunt? Ren Baqian changed the topic to the autumn hunt. It's almost time. Caretaker Sure immediately replied after hearing Ren Baqian's question. It's a custom. Every year on this day, people would carry a bow and knife and go hunting in the mountains. The more prey they have, the better their lives will be in the coming year. Furthermore, if they manage to hunt prey like the sharp-toothed tiger, they will be favored by the ladies back in the stronghold. It's also held in Lawn City. It's mainly held in the stronghold. However, Her Majesty will hold it once every year. The children of various influential families will participate in it to display their individual strength. Some who have grudges will also compete with each other during this time. In previous years' Great Hunt, did those who came to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday also participate? Of course, the youngsters of the Aboriginals are not as weak as them. We have to make them understand this point. Caretaker Sure replied as a matter of course. Rinpoche was enlightened. It turned out that the purpose of displaying one's strength was to let other nations see how brave the youngsters of Dayo were. This way, they would naturally feel a sense of fear in their hearts. When they returned and told others, their reputation would naturally spread. Soon after, Rinpoche's face turned green. Chapter 86. After inquiring about the great hunt from Caretaker Sure, Rinpoche had a rough idea of what to do. The autumn hunt was originally a custom of the Aboriginals. Now that the city was built, many commoners did not have such conditions. However, it was still held once a year. Those who participated were the sons and daughters of the court officials. They were able to show off their strength in front of the Empress. The Empress could also observe whether there were outstanding youth from various families through the autumn hunt. At the same time, the Empress would always invite the envoys from various countries to participate in the autumn hunt to let them see the strength of the Aboriginals' youths. After that, the news would naturally spread back to the various countries. This had already become a routine. After the Empress came to power, in addition to inviting the envoys from various countries, she would also invite the youths from various countries who came to send gifts to participate. This was also a form of deterrence and display of strength, because many of these youths would be in power in the future. It gave them a direct impression of the valiant strength of the Aboriginals and also spread the news through their mouths. The hunting location was a forest that was half a day's journey away from Lawn City. There were many wild beasts there, and many of them were even more ferocious. This was a stage for everyone to display their abilities. Almost every year, the person with the best results would receive more attention and a better path to promotion. At the same time, their performance during the hunt would also attract the attention of many young ladies. As a result, everyone who participated in the hunt was full of energy. However, Rinpoche's mind was filled with bad thoughts. According to Caretaker Sure, hunting on the mountain wasn't for hunting rabbits. Instead, it was for the individual. If he went, he would not know how to use knives, spears, rods, bows, and arrows. Not to mention hunting, it would be good if he did not get beaten up by the prey. Those young masters had servants, but he didn't. Furthermore, it was a rabbit. If it was a rabbit with a mouth full of fangs like those in the Beast Park, Rinpoche felt that he would not be able to defeat it. Wasn't it making things difficult for him to hunt with those humanoid Gundams who demolished houses with their bare hands? The matter of the beast wasn't what Rinpoche was most worried about. Instead, he was most worried about the humans. These days, he had offended many people in the Honglu Bureau. Initially, he thought that they couldn't do anything to him. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. If someone were to plot against him on the mountain, he would probably have to pay for his 50 kilograms of meat before he even encountered the beast. This was simply a scam. After thinking about it, Rinpoche cursed, "Damn it." If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have been so ruthless. Now, there were more than one or two people who wanted to chew his bones and swallow them. Since they had already come this far, there was no point in thinking too much. Unless, when the time came, he would hug the Empress's thigh and become her pendant. He would rather die than go up the mountain, even though he really wanted to do that. Needless to say, he had to go back and get a gun. Even if he brought 2 guns for self-defense, he might not be safe. But without a gun to defend himself, he was definitely not safe. Not only could a gun be used to deal with ferocious beasts, but it could also be used to deal with people. Calculating the time, he had to return to Earth tomorrow night. It seemed that he had to settle the matter of notifying the young masters of the other 3 nations and submit the name list. If someone else came after he left, he would let someone else handle it. The Empress would definitely understand. One day after the Great Hunt, he would return to Earth. When he returned, it would be just in time to attend the Empress's birthday celebration. Early the next morning, Rinpoche arrived at the Honglu Bureau to arrange for someone to inform them about the Great Hunt. Not long after he sat down, someone came to report that someone of high status had arrived. It was the 7th Prince of Great Xia. Currently, Great Xia was the most powerful nation that Rinpoche knew of. Whether in terms of land area or population, Its land area was 3 times that of Deio's. Its population was even more. It had more than 200 million people, which was close to 3 times the population. In a feudal world, this was already rather terrifying. With a large population, there were also many experts. It was said that 6 of the top 10 experts in the world were in Great Xia. Furthermore, Great Xia had a long history of culture. Every nation was deeply influenced by Great Xia, especially the Yun nation and the Qin nation, which were originally of the same origin as Great Xia. They were even more affected. In various senses, Great Xia was currently the hegemon of this world that Rinpoche knew of. With the arrival of the 7th prince of such a nation, Rinpoche really couldn't neglect him. He hurriedly brought Xiong Pai out. There was a large group of people and horses outside the door. Hundreds of armored and murderous knights were standing in front of the Honlu temple. Behind these knights was a large luxurious carriage. 6 extremely tall horses were pulling the carriage. They were half a head taller than the other horses. Their entire bodies were covered with satin-like fur and looked extremely spirited. Just by looking at these 6 horses, one could tell that they were definitely priceless. If any of them were to be placed in the hands of others, they would probably be treated as treasures. However, at this moment, they were being used to pull the carriage. Inevitably, one couldn't help but feel that it was a waste of God's gifts. Rinpoche stood in front of the Honlu temple and didn't continue to walk forward. The other party was the 7th prince of Great Xia, but he was an official of Deio. Coming out to welcome him was already sufficient etiquette. In fact, other than the people who came out to take a look at the beginning, the people who arrived later on were directly brought into the Honlu temple. As such, Rinpoche felt that standing in front of the door to welcome him was already sufficient. There was no need to eagerly run to the front to welcome him. After all, he wouldn't be paid by Deio. However, what made him feel strange was that these knights looked at him strangely. Although it seemed that their strict discipline allowed them to control themselves, the shocked expressions on their faces couldn't be concealed at all. Why are they looking at me? Because I'm handsome? I'm not that handsome to such a tragic extent, right? Rinpoche touched his face. He couldn't figure out what was going on with those people's gazes. He could only pretend that he didn't see them and continued to wait at the door. After standing in front of the door for 2 minutes, Rinpoche was getting more and more impatient. Just as he was considering whether to turn around and go back, a man on a horse ran to the front and gave the order. Soon after, hundreds of knights started to move forward slowly. The carriage got closer and closer to Rinpoche until it stopped in front of the door. Just now, from afar, he already felt that this carriage looked extremely luxurious. When it was right in front of him and he saw the golden-laid patterns and inlaid gems, Rinpoche really wanted to find a camera and take a picture of this carriage. What was a luxurious carriage? This was it. The body of the carriage was built with an unknown purple wood. Mountains, rivers, and clouds were first carved on it. Then, a pattern of flying cranes was inlaid with gold. It was vivid and lifelike. The eyes and crown of the cranes were inlaid with gems. As the light flowed, they were filled with spirituality. It was as if they could fly out from the walls of the carriage in the next second. This carriage looked more like an exquisite piece of art than a means of transportation. As the carriage stopped, a pair of hands reached out from inside the carriage. The curtains were pulled open, and the first person to come out was a stunning lady dressed in pink. Following her was a young man dressed in a white robe and a white jade crown on his head. When Rinpoche saw this young man's face, he was stunned. It was as if he was looking at himself in the mirror. His facial features were exactly the same. It was as if they were carved from the same mold. Rinpoche had never thought that there would actually be such a person in the world who looked exactly like him. Moreover, he was the 7th prince of Great Xia. Chapter 87. Rinpoche didn't know why he had such an impulse, but this feeling came from the bottom of his heart. It was as if it was the deepest desire and impulse in his heart. If he killed this person who looked exactly like him, then he would be the only one left. Rinpoche didn't know if the other party had the same thoughts as him. He suppressed the killing intent in his heart cupped his fists and asked, "Are you the seventh prince of Great Xia?" Rinpochian didn't dare to reveal even the slightest bit of killing intent in his heart. It was too easy for such a person to kill him. "That's me." The seventh prince suppressed the killing intent in his heart and showed an appropriate expression of surprise before nodding slowly. At this moment, the two of them had a murderous intent towards each other, but they concealed it very well. The only difference was that this was the second time the seventh prince had seen Rinpochian. Seventh prince walked in front of Rinpochian and faced him. Everyone in the surroundings looked at the two of them in a daze. Who would have thought that there would be two people so similar in this world? More than one person suspected that the seventh prince had a twin brother. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely that such a thing would happen. "I really feel that I'm looking at myself," the seventh prince exclaimed softly after sizing up Rinpochian. "This world is really mysterious. Xiao Wu, don't you agree?" The seventh prince's words were directed at the beautiful woman. The woman came to the seventh prince's side and looked at the two of them. She gently covered her mouth and appropriately revealed a shocked expression. Rinpochian pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He also felt that it was very mystical that there was actually someone different from him in another world. "In the future, you and I should get to know each other better." The seventh prince patted Rinpochian's shoulder and seemed to be very happy. However, Rinpochian didn't believe this nonsense. One would be a fool to believe him. If he was the seventh prince and saw someone who looked exactly like him, he would only have two thoughts. One was to kill him, and the other was to keep him by his side as a substitute so that he could use him as a shield at a critical moment. He was now an official of Dayo. Not to mention his position as the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, he was still a secondary class, rank 6 Honlu deputy. The second option was very difficult to achieve, so there was only one option left, and that was to kill him. This was what Rinpochian understood at this moment. Back then, he was able to have such an impulse in his heart, so how could a person of his status tolerate someone who looked exactly like him living in the outside world? Very soon, Rinpochian laughed and said, "I didn't expect that I would actually look like the Prince of Great Xia. This world is really magical." Perhaps in some corner of this world, there are people who look exactly the same. The seventh prince narrowed his eyes slightly. If someone else had said this in the past, he wouldn't have believed it. But now he believed it. "Your Highness, please follow me." Although His Highness should be addressed as such, right? Although Your Highness has a distinguished status, there are still some procedures that must be followed, Rinpochian said as he walked in. When everyone went in, the people outside were still in disbelief. Qi Heng and Qi Sheng also smacked their lips in surprise. They didn't expect such a coincidence to happen. He could brag about this when he got back. The seventh prince's subordinates were even more surprised than the two of them. Following the seventh prince, the woman called Xiao Wu and a person who looked like the commander of the cavalry followed. On the way into the courtyard, the seventh prince was still marveling at the wonders of this world. He casually asked, "Where is Deputy Ren's ancestral home? Maybe it's also Great Xia, or maybe it's a descendant of the royal family. Otherwise, it's really hard for me to imagine that there's anyone in this world who doesn't have any blood relations with me." When Rinpochian heard this, he thought to himself that if he wasn't from Earth, he might really believe it. But, he said, "I'm not worthy to be associated with you. My ancestors were commoners in the marketplace and didn't even have an official." The seventh prince turned his head to look at Rinpochian and then turned his head away as if nothing had happened. Xiao Wu, who was beside him, frowned. Just now, the seventh prince grabbed her hand very forcefully and it hurt her a little. But, very quickly, she intimately held onto the seventh prince's hand and transmitted the warmth of her palm to him. Looking at Xiao Wu bending over the table and filling out a piece of paper, Rinpochian recalled the Empress's instructions and said, "The annual Great Hunt will be held in a few days. I wonder if the seventh prince is interested? I really want to see the young generation of Dayo." The seventh prince laughed. "But before that, I would like to request Deputy to pass on the message that I would like to meet the Empress of your country." Rinpochian nodded his head. "I will report to Her Majesty." I don't know if Her Majesty will meet me. In addition, there will be someone to inform Your Highness about the time and location of the great hunt. The seventh prince nodded his head. Deputy Run, if you have time, I would like to have a drink with you. I hope you won't decline. Rinpoche laughed. Recently, I've been rather busy and I can't leave. If there's a chance in the future, I will definitely pay you a visit. Seeing that Rinpoche rejected him, the seventh prince didn't say anything else. After Xiao Wu finished filling out the paper, he brought his men and left. Rinpoche didn't send him off. After the seventh prince left, he sat down on the chair and panted heavily. Just now, he simply couldn't suppress the murderous intent in his heart. He even had the urge to let Xiong Pai pinch him to death. However, he didn't dare to do so. He didn't know if Xiong Pai would die, but he knew that he was definitely going to die. Furthermore, he wouldn't believe that the Prince of Great Xia didn't have a few experts by his side. At this moment, Xiong Pai had a blank look on his face. Deputy, he looks so much like you. If we were outside, I definitely wouldn't be able to recognize you. Rinpoche ignored him. Not to mention Xiong Pai. Even he himself wouldn't be able to recognize him. After the seventh prince left, the boiling murderous intent in his heart finally calmed down. Even he himself felt strange as to why he would have such a reaction when he saw the seventh prince. Before he came to this world, he didn't even kill a chicken. Although he had let Xiong Pai kill a few people these days, it was all for the purpose of intimidating others. He didn't feel comfortable in his heart, and this was the first time he had such a murderous intent toward a stranger. After sitting behind the table in a daze for a while, Rinpoche suddenly thought of a movie that he had watched before. There were countless versions of himself in countless parallel worlds, and every version of himself had different encounters. He always felt that this seventh prince was a different version of himself in a different world. Under some kind of coincidence, he came to this world and met the version of himself in this world. Although this idea wasn't reliable, he felt that it wasn't impossible. Otherwise, he couldn't explain the murderous intent in his heart just now. In the movie, every time he killed himself, he would become stronger. According to Rinpoche's understanding, the same origin would be divided into countless parts. After killing the version of himself in another world, he would obtain the origin of the other party and become stronger. Of course, this was just a delusion in the movie world. Chapter 88. What would happen if the seventh prince really died? Was there such a thing as an origin in this world? Would he absorb his origin? Was he really the Rinpoche from another world? When these thoughts appeared in Rinpoche's mind, it was as if he was holding a Pandora's box in his hand, constantly tempting him. However, he didn't dare to do so. Even those who were trampled or hanged to death by his order were the trusted aides or stewards of those young masters. Although he appeared to be ruthless, he knew what he could do and what he couldn't. With the identity of the seventh prince, he really didn't dare to do so. If he died here, it would be like a president of a big country dying in China. The impact would be too great. It would be like slapping the face of the great Xia imperial family and spitting on them. The other party didn't need any evidence. As long as there was a little doubt, they could send someone to kill him. Not to mention whether the Empress would protect him. Even if she wanted to, unless he never left the palace, the other party could just send an expert. Rinpoche rubbed his forehead and suppressed this thought. He had to settle the matter that the Empress had instructed him to do. It was better to keep the matter of the seventh prince at the bottom of his heart. However, Rinpoche raised his vigilance. If he had such an impulse, what about the other party? Would he be the same as him? If the other party had such thoughts, given his identity, he wouldn't have to worry about this and that. Then he would be in danger. That afternoon, all the people who had arrived to participate in the great hunt had been counted. Everyone was going to participate. Unlike Rinpoche, the others already knew about the great hunt. They had rushed to Lan City before the great hunt and naturally had the intention to participate. In any case, each of them could bring an attendant. After all, the people from other countries weren't as skilled as the aboriginals. Even if those heirs were skilled in martial arts, they still needed a helper who could help them carry their prey. This was the difference between them and Rinpoche. Although Rinpochian wasn't an aboriginal, he didn't have such preferential treatment. While counting the number of people, Rinpochian put aside his thoughts and went to look for Gudaxion. After all, he needed a mount to go hunting. Not to mention riding a horse. Rinpochian hadn't even touched one before. Even if it was a last-minute effort, he had to think of a way. Gudaxion was snoring in his room when he was woken up by Rinpochian. He scolded Rinpochian discontentedly. After hearing the purpose of Rinpochian's visit, he laughed and said, "You can take away the ones you like in the backyard." "Thank you very much, Sir Gu." Rinpochian cupped his hands in thanks and went straight to the backyard. Generally speaking, people in ancient times would refer to a cow pen or a horse pen. However, Gudaxion only referred to a pen. After Rinpochian went over and took a look, he understood why. The only thing missing was a horse. Speaking of which, there were relatively few horses in Dayo. Most of them were cattle and sheep. It was the same in this enclosure. There were a few sheep, the kind that pulled carts on the streets. They were huge and about the same size as horses. There were also a few cows that looked more docile, and they had curved and spiral horns. It was unknown what the difference was. The spiral horn cows were greenish in color, and their bodies were thinner. In addition, there were two giant birds not far away. Their feathers were yellowish-brown. They looked a little like ostriches, but their heads were much bigger than ostriches. Their beaks were wider, and their necks were thicker. There was a faint stench on their bodies. Even though it wasn't very strong, it was very disgusting. Rinpochian couldn't help but cover his nose. "Are these things used to be ridden?" Rinpochian curiously asked the person in charge. "Sir, these are mountain-gazing birds. They run extremely fast, especially when crossing mountains and rivers. They are much faster than other animals. They are usually used to deliver letters." The person in charge of these animals immediately said. Rinpochian curiously looked at the two mountain-gazing birds a few more times before asking, "What kind of mount is better for me to ride when I go hunting?" "It must be docile and easy to control." The first is the mountain-gazing bird. It can be ridden on mountains and can jump up rocks that aren't tall. The second is the crooked cow. It's fast and can carry things, but it's not as convenient as the mountain-gazing bird, the person in charge said. Rinpochian followed the direction of his finger and looked at the two crooked cows with spiral-shaped horns. Then he looked at the mountain birds. He preferred crooked cows as their backs were wider, making them more comfortable to ride on. Furthermore, they could carry things. Although the mountain-gazing bird could run and jump in the mountains, according to caretaker Sure, there were many ferocious beasts in the mountains. If they were to encounter ferocious beasts while riding on this bird, they might not be able to react in time. It would be safer for him to walk slowly on his own two legs. It wasn't that the crooked cow couldn't climb the mountain, but it wasn't as easy as the mountain-gazing bird. The main problem was the mountain-gazing bird's stench. If he kept riding it, it would be a torture. "Bring this crooked cow out for me to try," Rinpochian said. "All right." The person in charge opened the wooden fence and pulled out a crooked cow. Then he took a saddle from the side and put it on. After that, he held the rope and said to Rinpochian, "Sir, please." The crooked cow's back was about 3 meters above the ground. Rinpochian took a deep breath, grabbed the saddle, and climbed up. This crooked cow was rather well-behaved and didn't move at all when Rinpochian was crawling on the net. After Rinpochian was seated properly, the person in charge passed the rope to him and told him how to operate it. "Go!" Rinpochian's calf knocked on the cow's stomach, and the cow immediately moved forward. The reins were attached to the cow's face, and it was similar to a horse's. The way to control it was similar as well. In addition, the crooked cow was docile, so it was easy to control. However, once the crooked cow started to run, Rinpochian had to protect its body for fear that it would fall. Not long after, Rinpochian started to feel uncomfortable all over his body. The speed of this crooked cow wasn't considered slow, but it was too bumpy. Furthermore, it was swaying left and right, making Rinpochian feel motion sickness. Rinpochian hurriedly stopped the crooked cow and jumped onto the ground to rest. "Is this the most stable one?" Rinpochian asked. The mountain gazing bird is more stable than the crooked cow. Sir, you can give it a try. Seeing this, Rinpoche had no choice but to let the person in charge bring out the mountain gazing bird. The mountain gazing bird was also very docile, or it could be said that it had been tamed. Rinpoche stroked its feathers first. The mountain gazing bird let out a gee sound and turned its head to look at Rinpoche. Sir, you can stroke its head first. It likes to do that, the person in charge said. Rinpoche placed his hand on the mountain gazing bird's head, and it let out a gee sound again. At the same time, its eyes squinted slightly. It looked very comfortable, no different from a cat or dog that was begging to be stroked. After he climbed onto the back of the mountain gazing bird and ran for a while, he realized that even though this thing didn't look very eye-catching, it was indeed much more comfortable than riding the crooked cow. The feathers on its body were also softer, and it didn't chafe the inner thighs. The only drawback was the faint stench that kept drilling into his nose. Are all these things so smelly? Rinpoche asked. Yes, this thing relies on its stench to make other wild beasts not like to treat it as prey, the person in charge said. Rinpoche furrowed his eyebrows for a long time. All right, this thing was a little smelly, but it was indeed comfortable to ride. If he were to ride the crooked cow, he reckoned that he would collapse before he even reached his destination. If it was a little smelly, so be it. He would bear with it. At most, he would bring 2 bottles of perfume and spray it on when he returned from Earth. Chapter 89. Rinpoche opened his eyes, looked at the familiar roof, and stared blankly for a long time. In the novels, one would never come back after transmigrating, or one could wear whatever they wanted. Going through this torment every few days really gave him a headache. He was lucky this time that the Empress's birthday celebration and the Great Hunt happened to coincide with his time in that world. However, he couldn't be so lucky every time. It would be troublesome if he happened to return to Earth for some important matter. He really wished that he could control his transmigration back and forth. That would be much safer. After thinking about it, Rinpoche felt that he should install a camera. Since he couldn't find the reason for his transmigration from his body, he would record it to see how he transmigrated. Perhaps he could find some clues. He sat up from his bed and opened the window. It was even colder outside, and a gust of cold air hit him in the face. There was some snow outside the windowsill. It seemed that it had just snowed, probably last night. It was already November. It had been more than 4 months since he arrived in that world. However, only 2 months had passed in Rinpoche's body, and this was when the time on Earth and in the other world were added together. Rinpoche felt that if this continued, his lifespan would follow his body's time. Others had lived for 10 years, but his body had only lived for 5 years. However, in that world, others had lived for 4 years, but his body had lived for 6 years. In a short period of time, there wasn't much of a difference, but as time passed, it would gradually become apparent. He wandered between 2 worlds, but he was different from the people in both worlds. This was the biggest problem with time not synchronizing. However, this was only a guess. It would probably take a long time for him to verify whether this guess was true or not. Now, it was time to prepare the things that he needed. This great hunt was a huge trap for him. If he didn't handle it well, he might not have a future. If the 7th prince had the same thoughts when he saw Rinpoche, he wouldn't have as many misgivings as Rinpoche. There were also those sons of nobles who couldn't wait to eat him alive. In addition, there were all kinds of ferocious beasts in the mountain range. Rinpoche felt that to others, this was just a stage for them to showcase themselves, have fun, or observe others. To him, however, it was a huge trap where he could lose his life at any time. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he was being overly sensitive. If there were aboriginals around, no one would dare to make a move on him. However, he didn't know much about the Great Hunt. It was better for him to be fully prepared. It would be best if he could get closer to some of the aboriginals in the future. This way, he would be safer. However, the Empress wouldn't be able to keep her promise to not embarrass herself. However, Rinpoche felt that his life was more important. If he had a choice, he would rather hug the Empress's thigh than go up the mountain. He just didn't know if the Empress would kick him up the mountain. At the very least, she told him not to embarrass himself. She definitely didn't want him to hug her thigh at the foot of the mountain. First, he searched the internet for the things he needed and confirmed what he wanted. First was a crossbow. This thing was perfect for hunting in the mountains. Moreover, it was silent, so it wouldn't attract other people. The crossbow might not be as powerful as some bows and arrows, but even if he was given a composite bow, he still wouldn't be able to hit it. There were still 3 days left, and Rinpoche didn't think that he could master archery in such a short period of time. Next was the gun, which was one of the most common killing weapons in modern times. It was also more powerful than a crossbow. Rinpoche prepared to get one for self-defense. If possible, Rinpoche also wanted to get 2 grenades or something. If he really met with an accident, he could throw these grenades at the other party. Even if they didn't kill him, they could still injure him. At the very least, they could scare him and make it easier for him to escape. These are the main things he needed. There were still some other miscellaneous things. According to what Rinpoche knew, they still had to camp for the night. There would always be some small things that could be used. For example, sleeping bags, various seasoning boxes, and a military knife. Rinpoche didn't have the means to buy guns and crossbows. Even though there was a phone number for selling guns written on the door of the toilet at the bus terminal, it was written so openly that the police would think that they were blind. Rinpoche still felt that it wasn't reliable. If he was lucky, they would sell him a BB gun. If he was unlucky, they would sell him a water gun. These were all tricks. It was better not to find trouble for himself. He was afraid that he would have to look for Chun-Ching for these things. In any case, he was a young master. Rinpoche believed that he would definitely be able to find someone to get them. Rinpoche heated up a bag of milk in the fridge with the microwave and ate his breakfast with biscuits. Then, he picked up his phone and gave Chun-Ching a call. "I say, did something happen to you recently? I couldn't find you." "Sure enough, men become bad when they get rich. Are you afraid that I will disturb you?" Hearing Chun-Ching's voice, Rinpoche laughed. He was intentionally distancing himself from Chun-Ching, and Chun-Ching must have felt it. He had no choice. He was afraid that Chun-Ching would find out about his secret. After all, his disappearance and reappearance were too regular. It would always make people feel that something was wrong. "Is that why you were so bad?" Rinpoche laughed. "That was in the past. I have turned over a new leaf now." Chun-Ching immediately said, "Are you free in the afternoon? Let's have a meal together." "Sure, send me the address. Jiang Nim was talking about you yesterday." Chun-Ching immediately said, "All right, you go ahead with your work." Rinpoche hung up the phone and noticed that he had received a few messages. He opened them and saw that one was sent by an unknown number 2 days ago. "This isn't Fei. I'm getting my salary for my new job. When are you free? I will treat you to a meal as a form of gratitude." And Fei? Rinpoche's first reaction was that he had sent the message to the wrong person. Then, he suddenly thought of the girl who was wearing hearing aid but was very confident in finding a job. He closed the message and looked at his WeChat. Dong Haiqing had sent a message. "Young Master Run, it seems like you don't like your old classmate anymore." A strong sense of resentment and dissatisfaction was transmitted through the screen of the phone. Below her was a message from Chunbing. "I haven't been able to contact you since the gathering. Did something happen?" Rinpoche shook his head. Let them think whatever they want. At that time, he had just entered the other world and was still in the mood to contact his old classmate. However, after such a long time, Rinpoche always felt that the other world was the main world. He didn't care about many things on Earth anymore. Of course, this was also because Rinpoche's thoughts were always on how to preserve his life and climb up. After a long time, it seemed that the other world was the important one. On Earth, as long as one had money, one wouldn't starve to death. There was nothing to worry about. Rinpoche continued to scroll through WeChat. His parents were still posting things like the way to maintain good health, the secret to longevity, and the 10 things that everyone should know. He placed his phone back on the table and surfed the internet for a while. Then, he changed his clothes and drove to the city center to find a store that sold surveillance equipment. He bought a set of equipment and arranged to install it in the afternoon. After that, he found a nearby barbershop that looked well renovated and was ready to get his hair cut. However, When he entered the shop, he saw a girl wearing a red device on her ear. She was washing someone's hair. Can it be such a coincidence? Rinpoche laughed. He didn't even think of replying to her message. Previously, he had helped her out because he had nothing better to do. He thought that he wouldn't have the chance to meet her again. After all, in a city with a population of millions, the chances of meeting each other were very small. Many people wouldn't even meet each other in their lifetime, let alone in his situation. He didn't expect to meet Fei at a random barber shop. He didn't know if this world was too coincidental or if it was fated. Chapter 90. And Fei washed the guest's hair and wrapped a towel around it. When she raised her head, she saw Rinpoche standing beside her. She was so surprised that she opened her mouth and let out an ah sound. New job? Rinpoche smiled and asked. Yes. And Fei's lips opened and closed as she spat out a word. She seemed to have a hard time, as she preferred to write on a piece of paper. I saw your message. I will send you a message when I'm free, Rinpoche said. I still have to trouble you for a haircut. Ah. And Fei nodded her head immediately. It seemed that it was easier to say the word ah than other sounds. Rinpoche lowered his head and allowed Fei to apply shampoo and scrub his hair. And Fei's hands were very soft, and she was very attentive when she was washing his hair. After that, Rinpoche sat on a chair and asked the hairdresser to shave his hair flat. He left a short stubble on his head, and it looked like he had just come out of a prison cell. It was probably because it was too hot. The people of Dayo did not think that their bodies, hair, and skin were inherited by their parents. Everyone's head was clean, and bald was also a common hairstyle. For example, Xiongpai was bald. This made Rinpoche equate being bald with being strong. How could one become strong if he was not bald? It was a pity that he could not become strong even if he was bald. Before leaving, Rinpoche even bid farewell to Fei before leaving. Half an hour later, Rinpoche sat in a restaurant opposite Qinqing. He did not look much different from before. Rinpoche, on the other hand, had changed a lot. Most importantly, he had put on a lot of weight, and his temperament had become more mature. After all, there was always the risk of losing one's life in that world. It was hard not to be calm. Is there anything you need from me? Qinqing sat down and stared at Rinpoche for a long time before suddenly asking. It was not strange for Rinpoche to look for him for a meal. Even though he was not a very proactive person, it was normal for him to look for an old friend after not showing his face for a long time. However, Rinpoche did not look for him for lunch often. It was usually at night. Even though there were no additional programs, everyone was usually very busy at noon. On the contrary, having a meal at night was more leisurely and carefree. Indeed, there is something. Help me buy some things. Rinpoche nodded his head and said, What things? For you to ask me to buy something for you. It's definitely not something ordinary. Don't tell me it's firearms? Qinqing was obviously joking. He knew Rinpoche too well. As long as Rinpoche wasn't tricked, he definitely wouldn't touch these things. There must be some other troublesome things or some contraband. To him, it was not a problem at all. However, what Rinpoche said next stunned him. I want firearms, pistols, military crossbows, and grenades, Rinpoche replied calmly. Qinqing looked at Rinpoche as if he did not know him. He lowered his voice and asked, What are you trying to do? You have a bright future ahead of you, so don't be impulsive. No matter what it is, I can help you think of a solution. Instead of using the power of the government, you chose to use those underhanded methods. Are you crazy? Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You are thinking too much. Do I look like that kind of person? Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, Qinqing heaved a sigh of relief and said, You scared me just now. You don't seem to be that daring. I thought you encountered some kind of stimulation. I will be entering the mountains in a few days. It will be dangerous, so I need to bring something to protect myself. Even so, I don't need a grenade, right? If Rinpoche wanted to enter the mountains with a gun or a crossbow, it would be understandable. But why would he bring a grenade? Carrying things wasn't something that could be played around. I have already said that it will be dangerous. There will be many wild beasts. Sometimes, a gun isn't that useful, Rinpoche replied. You can use a rifle. No matter what you encounter, you will be dead after firing a crossbow. Rinpoche shook his head. Using a rifle would be too conspicuous. Even though a military crossbow was filled with a modern industrial vibe, it wasn't as conspicuous as a rifle. Even though the Empress already had some speculations in her heart, she couldn't let others have some suspicions. Furthermore, if she really encountered danger and the opponent was a human, a rifle would easily raise the opponent's vigilance. The concealment of a handgun was much higher. As for a grenade, it gave people the feeling that it was more like a piece of metal. It wasn't so easy to raise people's vigilance. There might even be fools who would use their hands to catch it. Even if they didn't catch it, they wouldn't hide far away. Rinpoche's idea was to use a crossbow for hunting. If he really encountered danger and needed to make a move, he would use a handgun and a silencer. He would try his best not to let others find out and avoid exposing too many things. A handgun, a grenade, a military crossbow, as well as a silencer, bullets, and crossbow bolts. The bulletproof vest must be light, and anesthetic that can be smeared on the crossbow bolts must be strong. Also, I need a military knife, Rinpoche calmly said. In order to save his life, he had to prepare as much as possible. When Chun Xing heard the things that Rinpoche wanted, he frowned and said, I always feel that you are not going into the mountains. Instead, you're going to war. However, I won't ask too much. I can help you get them. Do you have any requests? Also, when do you need them? I don't have many requests. You know that I don't know anything about these things. I just want them to be as powerful as possible. However, time is tight. I need them by the day after tomorrow at the latest. It would be best if it is tomorrow. In addition, help me find a place where I can practice my shooting skills. I don't know much about this thing. I need to familiarize myself with it, Rinpoche said. Chun Xing nodded his head. A place to practice your shooting skills is easy. I know of a shooting range. As for the other things, I can help you ask around. It shouldn't be a big problem. After finishing his sentence, he took out his phone and made a call. After making 2 calls, he received a text message and forwarded it to Rinpoche. Just call this number and tell it is Heisey who asked you to go there. I will contact the shooting range later. I will pass you the phone number. Rinpoche nodded his head. These things could be said to be fully equipped. He had already made the best preparations that he could. The rest would have to depend on luck. For the rest of the meal, both parties didn't mention these things again. Just like what Chun Xing said, as a friend, he would help Rinpoche get the things that he needed. He couldn't care less about other things. Rinpoche was also very grateful that Chun Xing didn't ask too many questions. This was also what he liked the most about Chun Xing. In the afternoon, Rinpoche left the restaurant. Upon returning to his car, he dialed the phone number that Chun Xing gave him. After telling him Heisey's name, the man gave Rinpoche 2 ways to make a deal. The first way was to contact him via WeChat. Then, Rinpoche would place the gun at a certain location and he would pick it up himself. The other way was for someone to pick it up. Rinpoche didn't understand anything and was more inclined to look at the real thing. Naturally, he chose the second way, after which they went to a certain location. After waiting for a while, a van stopped by the roadside. Other than the driver, there was a man in the back seat. He handed over a mask. Rules. It was a very sturdy man who looked very fierce. If it was the previous Rinpoche, he would definitely stay far away from this kind of person. However, after getting used to seeing aboriginals, he felt that this man looked very ordinary and didn't have much of a deterrent force. Rinpoche nodded his head and consciously put on the mask. Chun Xing introduced it, so safety should be guaranteed. After driving for about an hour, Rinpoche didn't even know where he was before the van stopped. After Rinpoche was brought into the house, he walked down a flight of stairs before the mask was removed. Other than the lights and the surroundings, there was nothing else. It seemed like they were in a basement. There weren't many types of guns in the surroundings. It wasn't as dazzling as what Rinpoche had imagined. However, after thinking about it, it made sense. After all, they weren't overseas. There were only a dozen types of guns. There were pistols, rifles, and shotguns. There were 5 types of pistols. There were also 2 crossbows hanging at the side. One was big, and the other was small. Both of them had scopes and were hung on the wall. They are here. Take a look. Chapter 91. I don't know much about these things. I need a pistol that is more powerful, has less recoil, and has higher accuracy. Is there a requirement for distance? The man asked. Playing in the woods, I think a distance of tens of meters is the most, Rinpoche said. He deliberately used the word play. The man got up and took a black pistol from the shelf and placed it on the table. This is a domestic-made QSG-92. It should meet your requirements. A few days ago, someone on the internet put this gun in the top 10 famous guns list. Although it was a rumor, this gun is really good. Moreover, it is cheap. The only drawback is that it jams sometimes. Is there anything else besides this? Rinpoche was a little scared when he heard about jams. If it suddenly jams when he was waiting for help, he would have no place to cry. CZ-83, check, safe, and reliable. There is a 9M. The man picked up another gun and placed it on the table. What's the difference? Rinpoche asked. The 9M is more powerful, but the shooting range is shorter. Rinpoche played with the CZ-83. Every man was interested in two things, guns and cars. Rinpoche was no exception. He never thought he would have the opportunity to own a gun. This one, I want a 9M. The recoil won't be too strong, right? Rinpoche immediately said. Anyway, he didn't know much about these things. As long as it was powerful, the recoil wasn't too strong, and it was safe and reliable, it would be fine. Moreover, this gun was very comfortable to hold. For a man, these are all small things. The man laughed. Then he made Rinpoche make a posture of holding the gun with both hands and patted the bottom of his wrists. About this much strength. Following which, Rinpoche bought a military crossbow, bullets, spare magazines, crossbow bolts, silencers, 3 grenades, and a 20-centimeter long military knife. Rinpoche spent a sum of money to bring these things back to the car. He was on tenterhooks on the way back, fearing that he would encounter a drunk driver. He never worried in the past, but now there were a lot of prohibited items in the car. If he was caught, it wouldn't just be a tragic ending for him. After returning to that world, Rinpoche didn't know what would happen to him after disappearing for a few days in the detention center. He was certain that it wouldn't end well. Fortunately, such a melodramatic thing did not happen. Rinpoche successfully sent the items back to his residence. Then he went to the hospital to get the anesthetic that could be used on the crossbow. For the next 2 days, he spent his time practicing his marksmanship and crossbow at the shooting range. While Rinpoche was practicing his spear skills in China, the Empress was sitting in the palace and drinking wine. Not long after, the 7th prince was brought in. Greetings to the Empress of Dayo. The 7th prince cupped his fists and said. The other party was the Empress of Dayo, while he was the Prince of Great Xia. Naturally, he couldn't be too polite. Ever since the 7th prince came in, the Empress had been staring at his face. Why? Does the Empress of Dayo find me familiar? The 7th prince asked with a smile. The Empress tapped on the wooden couch with her fingers. She didn't say anything, but her body slightly straightened. You aren't him, so the way you speak is different, the Empress said as she drank a cup of wine. I'm the 7th prince of Great Xia. The 7th prince's meaning was obvious. Someone take a seat. The Empress's cold voice sounded. Immediately, someone placed a chair in the middle of the palace, and the 7th prince sat on it. You want to see me? What's the matter? I want to exchange something with the Empress of Dayo. I want to use 7 dragon scales to exchange for a bottle of blood. The 7th prince smiled. This was the purpose of his visit to Dayo. As for the birthday celebration, he didn't care at all. If it wasn't for the importance of the item he wanted to exchange, why would he come to this barren land? Whether it was the dragon scales or the bottle of blood, they were extremely valuable to him. The Empress didn't even need to think before saying, "It's not enough." The price was too little. Even though the dragon scales were valuable and she could use them, it wasn't enough to exchange for the blood. This was because the Empress knew that the blood he wanted was the blood of the Kirin in the palace. However, the blood of that Kirin wasn't pure. In order to exchange for a bottle of the blood, the Kirin would lose a lot of its vitality. It was unknown how long it would take for it to recover. This dragon scale isn't the one in Great Xia's palace. I found it in the surroundings when I first discovered it. It contains the aura of a dragon that has already disappeared. Now, you're the one begging me. The Empress was slightly tempted, but she still didn't relent. Even though the dragon scale was useful, it wasn't a must for her. The fact that the Empress came all the way from Great Xia to Dayo was enough to prove the importance of this bottle of blood. The seventh prince had already expected this and wasn't surprised. He nodded his head and said, plus a drop of dry dragon blood that was found at the same time as the dragon scale. Only then did the Empress nod her head. If Rinpochian heard the exchange between the two of them, he would probably be shocked and reevaluate this world. Previously, when he first came to this world, he saw a Kirin. However, he didn't have the chance to see it again. This matter was buried in his heart. However, there was actually a dragon in Great Xia. This meant that this world was much more profound than what he had always thought. I want another person, the seventh prince said again. The Empress frowned. Whether he is an aboriginal or not doesn't matter to the Empress of Dayo, the seventh prince said. The Empress thought of the person who looked exactly like the seventh prince and suddenly laughed. Actually, I like your face very much. Every time I see it, I feel very happy. How about this? Leave your head to me and then take him away. The seventh prince was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that person to be so important to the Empress of Dayo. He thought that a foreigner was insignificant to the Empress. This was a little miscalculation. Since the Empress of Dayo wants to keep him, then forget it. The deal is still valid. The seventh prince put on a smile again and said. However, the Empress's next sentence immediately made him freeze. No, I have changed my mind. I hate people who covet my things. On account that you are the Prince of Great Xia, get lost. The Empress waved her big sleeves on the couch. The seventh prince immediately felt a terrifying aura hit him in the face. After a while, the seventh prince returned to the accommodation that was arranged for him in Dayo. He frowned and his heart was intertwined with anger and puzzlement. Originally, this deal was already settled. However, in the end, because he wanted to ask Rinpochian to come over, it was ruined. Why did this happen? No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand why the Empress would make such a decision. That was a drop of blood and a scale left behind by a dragon that had already disappeared. To the Empress of Dayo, it was considered a treasure. Your Highness, is the matter not settled? The beautiful lady called Xiao Wu came to his side and asked softly, You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.